Yes, okay. I was hoping you'd see this space.
Hey, can you hear me?
Sure can.
What's up?
All right, I've got a bone to pick with you. All right, regarding all this. No, I'm kidding. Tell me what you know about Harry Rositzke.
What do you want to know about him? I mean,
Base.
there's a lot, man. The guy had a career spanning like 70 something years, going all the way back to the 40s.
So let's start with the beginning, right? Because I know little to nothing about this guy except the fact that this was a name mentioned by Greg Bishop, who said it was mentioned to him by Bill Moore after years and years of trying to find out the identity of Falcon.
Well, I mean, let's delve into that. Why do you think Bill Moore is to be believed for anything? You know, Bill Moore was caught passing himself off as an intelligence operative, showing people fake IDs, uh, purporting himself to be,
But he
a
was
quote unquote operative.
he was
He
direct.
also was
Oh, he was directed.
caught, huh?
I believe he was directed to do that to show. I forget the guy's name, his clearances. Because then the guy would go and tell people, and it was kind of a thing where it was like it was a planned maneuver. But at the end of the day, he came out in that conference and he admitted everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty, I don't know, dude. I just wouldn't believe anything that Bill Moore says. You know, Bill Moore was also, he faked those Aquarius documents, those Project Aquarius documents that came out.
He didn't
I
fake
mean,
them;
just,
they were given to him.
he 100% altered those documents before releasing them to the public. Like, that's a fact. Like, he got caught and he even admitted to doing it after he got caught.
All part of a counterintelligence operation that he believed, like, he believed he was doing the quote unquote the right thing because he knew that they were trying to catch Soviet players, but he was promised, right, the goods in return, which he never got. He just got a bunch of bullshit. But like, my point is, he never did have to come out in '89 the way he did and basically say, like, XYZ is, like, this part of the lore is wrong, this part of the lore is wrong. I had a hand in doing this, this, and this. Because after that, I mean, his career was like torpedoed. Like, he had nothing to do with UFOs after that at all, except for like private correspondences with Friedman and pretty much all the high level researchers that still fuck with him after that point, even knowing what he did. So like, I don't know. I just don't think that like Greg Bishop would be, yeah, he worked so closely with Greg Bishop, and Greg Bishop would be trying to get this identity of Falcon for years and years and years, and finally, and wasn't even like, he didn't even like drop the name. I believe that like that Greg Bishop guessed it, and Bill Moore was finally like, yeah, that's the guy. And then any more questions about him, he wouldn't answer. He just like, I don't want to deal with this at all. I don't want anything to do with UFOs at all anymore. So I don't know. That doesn't sound like someone to me that would be spreading a lie. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Let me pull up my Rositzke notes. Like, I have a PDF that I compiled. Just let me pull it up just so I can make sure to get my sources right and stuff when I'm like talking about them.
Okay, yeah, because I've been meaning to look into. I actually like have his books in my cart. I just have been so freaking busy. I have not been able to look into him at all. But it sounds like he's had a very extensive career in the CIA. And if the Bill Moore Harry Rositzke connection is true, right? Like, I'll give the benefit of the doubt that it's not 100% accurate, but that would mean that the CIA had a hand in using the AFOSI in order to do this little, Soviet fishing expedition, and are largely responsible for a lot of the lore that we talk about today. So it's not AFOSI that people need to be looking at. Again, it points to the CIA.
Yeah, and I mean, that Bill Moore, like, he was actually recruited as a CIA agent. He didn't go through the process, but he was recruited by the CIA out of high school and did like an internship with them out of high school. You do know that, right? And
No, I do not know.
Yeah. And, you know, yeah, I'm trying to find my source for that. Fucking,
Yeah, I'm
I
pulling up.
think it was a podcast with Greg Bishop where he mentioned it. Greg Bishop has done a lot of podcasts, but not any of the mainstream ones. Like the guy, and he hasn't done any really recently, but he did a bunch of them back in the early 2010s. He did.
Right? And the one with Paul Kimball.
Yeah. And I mean, a bunch of just obscure podcasts that are definitely not around anymore. Like ones that I can't even recall the name of. But yeah, man, Greg Bishop, like he's out there and he's accessible. I've been meaning to send him a message, and ask just to see if he'll respond and talk to him. But I wonder if he would do a space.
I talked to him in person. I don't think he would do a space. I think he avoids the, he never really liked the whole UFO atmosphere. And at one point, I think he said, um, it, the personalities got to be more interesting than the actual subject itself. So he might be a little disenfranchised there. But maybe, I mean, he's very accessible, very easy to talk to. But when I did talk to him, man, like he's like the definition of like a straight shooter. Like he won't sugarcoat anything, but there's like no air of like small talk at all either. He'll just, he'll listen, he'll answer, and he'll ask a question. And it's just, maybe I'm socially awkward, but, I mean, I definitely am. But like when I was talking to him, I was just like, holy shit, I wasn't expecting this at all. Like you need to really come prepared when you talk to Greg Bishop, I think.
Yeah, the guy seems like he's really highly intelligent, like high functioning, maybe like on the spectrum a little bit, but definitely a high functioning, kind of like neuroatypical. He's just really, really odd. That, or maybe he's just a fucking genius, and that's how geniuses act sometimes, is they just act, they're so above us. They're so above us, they can't even be able to, they can't even begin to relate to us, they just, normal interaction doesn't go smoothly with them.
I mean, I would love to use that excuse for myself personally, but I know that's not the case. But I could definitely see that with like Greg Bishop just being like some sort of savant of some sorts.
Yeah, man, personally, I'm just an idiot, I know that and I admit that, yeah. So, if you ever have any, questions about maybe my, I'm not on the spectrum, I'm just dumb. But, alright, fucking, I can't find my notes, but basically Rositzke worked for the OSS, and then it became, the CIA, but he worked, in the 1950s, he worked in Germany, of course in West Germany, and he worked in East Germany, and, what was his nickname that what was it? He had like a really funny nickname that like the East German spies, that were up under him used to call him, but I forgot what the name, I forgot what it was. But, yeah, man, he was just a big Cold War. He operated out of Munich and, was a big time, anti-Soviet, figure. And he did a lot of the CIA media. The CIA had a radio show that he was, a guest speaker on a lot. He was really a kind of like a vocal, kind of a, I don't know, kind of like a James Bond type guy as far as his influence on the media and the way that he put himself out there. He was not a quiet professional, you would say, that you think of when you think of most CIA agents. They're he was kind of flashy and he wrote books and he went on a bunch of radio shows and, he was involved in the Vietnam War, doing counterintelligence. He was he operated in Laos for a little bit doing in an advisory capacity. And, the guy was, just staunchly anti-Soviet. That's the thing that defined his career was, Cold War, anti-Soviet, mostly, like I said, he did almost a decade in West Germany. If I recall those dates right, yeah. But I don't think, I don't really know for sure if there's nothing that really ties him to the Falcon role. I always thought that, there's nothing that I have found that really ties him to the Falcon role. Do you know what exactly, is alleged to be the proof, like the evidence, that he did, that was his identity, or that was
No.
his alias?
So as I understand it, there's like no documentation or any sort of anecdotal evidence saying that aside from Bill Moore making that connection. And I don't even think Bill Moore actually met Falcon, right? I think this is something that he surmised that this was the guy, Harry Rositzke. And it took a while for him to tell Greg Bishop that. But Greg Bishop never, as far as I know, like he never elaborated on it. He never, like Greg Bishop ended up having to do a lot of his own research on Harry Rositzke after the fact. But no, there's no like concrete thing tying them or him to that role aside from again Bill Moore. And even Bill Moore,
Yeah,
like,
because
yeah,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But here's the thing, right? Harry Rositzke was born in like 1911, I think. It's either 1911 or 1910. I think it's 1911. And, so that means in like all right, yeah. Yeah, so he was 1911 to 2002 was his life. So he was already, in his 70s, by the time that 1980 rolled around. So like, is this dude, I mean, think about that. Like, that means like by the end of, he was in his 80s by the time that like Bill Moore came out and, did that confession in 1989. Are you telling me that, he's in his 70s and this guy's going around, palling around with Doty? Like, how did he even meet Doty? And, maybe through like the association of retired, intelligence officers, maybe, that club that they have. But even it's like, it just doesn't make any sense, man. I think Harry Rositzke, cause like I said, he was a real popular figure, man. He wrote a lot of books. He was on a bunch of radio shows. I think maybe Bill Moore may have been either screwing with, Greg Bishop, just kind of using like a popular, kind of like a boogeyman type figure within the intelligence community, like Harry Rositzke. I mean, I have a feeling that he was kind of, either being played or he was playing with Greg Bishop and just like saying a name of a popular intelligence guy that like Greg would know, or that Greg would be able to find a lot of like material on that would kind of convince him that, yeah, maybe that's right. But then I don't know. I mean, if you say enough names, eventually somebody's just going to agree with you just to shut you up. And I just don't see the Harry Rositzke connection. Like I really don't. I just think it was, yeah, like I said, like a name, like it'd be like saying, okay, back then it'd be the equivalent of like saying James Bond today. If somebody, I mean, not, okay, not James Bond, but I don't know. It just, Harry Rositzke was like a larger than life intelligence guy. And around that time, he was well known. He was doing his media tours and stuff like that. So it feels kind of like Greg Bishop maybe got this wrong, or Bill Moore or whoever.
well, yeah, then it would be Bill Moore, right? The thing about Bill Moore is like Bill Moore was one of the top. I mean, he's definitely I think like top 3 of all time as far as UFO researchers go. If you take away the fact that he made that Faustian bargain with Doty and AFOSI. But that's why he was chosen, because like they sent out a bunch of leads. He was the only one to follow it up. And that's how they knew to contact this guy, that this guy would be our guy. But part of I guess part of the reasoning for Doty coming out as Falcon on that UFO cover-up live, was it UFO cover-up live? Yeah, he came out as Falcon, or he didn't really come out as Falcon. Like he was like kind of taped and like they put him in shadow and they changed his voice and all that stuff. But it was still like very, I think, it's very easy to tell that it's Doty, right? That's acting as Falcon when he's talking about the strawberry ice cream and stuff like that. Now, like, I think a popular theory is that the reason that was done is because now all the eyes are on AFOSI and Doty as kind of like the head of this operation, which makes no sense. It makes no sense to me why AFOSI would be conducting this large scale counterintelligence operation without any help from any other agency, when we also know the NSA was involved in the whole Benowitz thing, right? So like this made AFOSI kind of like the slow moving, easy target for people in the community to be like, to point the finger at, like, look, that's where this is coming from. This is where all the misinformation is coming from. These are the guys. When in fact it's not. Like I know someone that does make the argument for Doty actually being Falcon and playing a much larger role in all of this, but like I just find that very hard to believe. Like it's much more believable for me for someone like Harry Rositzke or maybe a Harry Rositzke type figure using AFOSI behind the scenes in order to do that.
Well, I thought that Greg Bishop, he thought that Falcon was either Doty, or he thought that the alternative would be a DIA agent. And Harry Rositzke never worked for the DIA. And this was as recently as like 2000, like I think 2012 maybe, is when Greg Bishop, when I read in a, when the hell was it? God, man, I wish I had my notes. It was sometime in 2012 that Greg Bishop did an interview, or maybe he gave a lecture where he talked about that. And he said, yeah, hold on. God dang it.
Cause like, I thought Greg Bishop had he had a series of articles that came out in 2000. Oh fuck. I guess I wish I had my notes too. Like he had a bunch of articles basically IDing Falcon's Harry Rositzke. I didn't know he changed his position on that.
All right. I'm at my desktop now. Hold on. Like I have like a PDF. Yeah. I'll tell you what, a fantastic, like I don't know if you're big into PDFs like I am. I turn everything into PDFs and then I use a Foxit PDF reader and just like search. So I just plugged in plugged in Falcon and searched my PDF library. It's like it can search, 1,000 PDFs if you want, which is about what I have. And right here, it's 2012. It was, so this was written by Grant Cameron, 2012, June, and it says that this coming Saturday, June 30th, 2012, Greg Bishop, friend of Bill Moore's, will present a lecture, Who is Falcon? And Falcon was blah, blah, blah. Says that Falcon was behind the story that there were captured alive aliens at Area 51 and that there were 3 alien ambassadors who spent time as guests in the United States. And then the controversy over who Falcon was. The 2 competing theories are that Falcon was, Master Sergeant Doty, or that he was a high-ranking DIA official. Bishop will make a case, that it was the latter. So he's saying that Bishop's theory as of 2012 was that it was a DIA official. And that would not have been Harry Rositzke. But did he change his mind?
I'm going to look at the article by Greg Bishop. The thing is, Grant Cameron, I hate to say this. I don't think he's as reliable as people say. I think he's done a lot of great work transcribing certain things and, has a lot of interviews that are out there that are great. But I have heard him speak before and I was a little disappointed that he takes some things for granted and doesn't, he basically doesn't investigate half the things he puts out, right? That's not his role. That's not his job. But yeah, let me find out, that article if I can by Greg Bishop.
What do you, think about, I don't know, there's kind of a new theory that I've been, kind of considering is that, are you aware that 2 senators, were contacted by Paul Benowitz during the time that he was, being fucked with by Doty, and that these 2 senators went out in person, to Kirtland. And this is at two separate times that Paul Benowitz filed complaints about, being investigated by AFOSI. And each time that these 2 senators, or each time that a senator went out there to Kirtland to ask about this, to inquire about, what was going on and what was being done to Paul Benowitz, both of the senators were told by the Air Force that there was no investigation going on at all. Like none. Are you aware of that? I didn't know until the other day, and I came across that.
So the senators went there and then they were told that there was no investigation going on at all?
Yeah, none at all.
See, this smells like CIA, man.
Or maybe Doty just has a wild imagination. I don't know. Maybe Doty is just maybe he's a sociopath, which we know he kind of is, but I don't know. Maybe a lot of this is just like Doty. I don't know who knows what Doty's motivations were, and I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense, man. It just doesn't make any sense. And then how like after the Benowitz affair, how he got taken out of OFOSI and put into just normal intelligence, normal Air Force intelligence and sent to Germany, like after the Benowitz affair, like that's not a job well done. You know what I'm saying? That's like, that wasn't him getting a promotion, right?
Yeah, I've often wondered about that as well, right? Because he kind of like had a spotty record. I think like what he got demoted to like being something at a mess hall or something like that. Um, I'm like where my confusion lies with Doty is that like when he comes back in 2005 and pushes the Serpo stuff, that the Serpo documents themselves were not created by Doty. Like there's just no fucking way. The science in there was some of the science in there was actually pretty high level according to some people and has them perplexed as well, right? So it's like it kind of makes sense because he was talking to Put Off and Kit Green at that time and quote unquote working with them. And he's on record basically he got caught in an email chain discussing it with Kit Green, and Kit Green even was like, there's a lot of like really like there's some real science in here, but for the most part, like it smells like disinfo, right? So that to me it makes me think that Kit Green and Put Off were not aware of anything to do with the Serpo documents, or at least like the release of them or the creation of them, because they themselves thought it was disinfo. But they did recognize that some of the science in there was pretty valid. So when he's doing that in 2005, how old is he? He's in like what, his 70s, 60s? But he's well retired at that point. So why do that? Who's the team behind him that gave him those documents for him to then impersonate all those personalities and disseminate them? Right? That's a larger team. So, and on top of that, he comes back 20 years later to come on Twitter Spaces to do basically the same exact thing, right? So it's just all fucking confusing. Like it doesn't make any sense at all, and I have no idea what his motivations are.
Have
Oh,
you
and
heard have you ever listened to the Art Bell show that was with Greg Bishop and Doty at the same time?
oh, I
Like they
have to
were
have
both.
I have it queued up. I'm actually a subscriber to Coast, deep dark secret of mine. But before we get to that, real quick, so posted on July 16th, 2012 by Greg Bishop. After my recent announcement of the possible identity of the infamous Falcon of MJ12 and Aviary lore, a few commentators, researchers, website began speculating on the legitimacy of OSS and CIA veteran Harry August Rositzke as that former mysterious figure. Blah, blah, blah. And then he talks about a podcast that he did, and I probably should bookmark and listen to his podcast. But that's 2012, just for our sake.
Is that podcast available? Why don't we listen to it?
Uh, let me see. Richard Saradet. Yeah, it is available. Hold on. Or at least I think it is.
Do you have time? Do you want to listen to it? I mean, do you have anything going on right now?
Grider, I have no life. I make a comic book, for God's sake.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, dude. I mean, if you want to have a little listening party, and that'll give me time to kind of organize my like while we're listening. I'll have some time to kind of organize because like I searched for Falcon and then I'd search for dude. I've got like so many hits, like so. Dude, I just have a lot of material that I've gathered, and even stuff on Harry Rositzke. And I can kind of organize and kind of go through it and pick out the good stuff, to share with you. Yeah, because it's been so long since. I mean, like it's been so long since I've kind of like looked into Harry Rositzke, and I I can't recall a lot off the top of my head, but I remember thinking that like I said, it just seemed like kind of it seemed like there was no connection, but I would love to hear what Greg Bishop says. Of course, that guy's like he's definitely more knowledgeable than me. Even 2012 Greg Bishop probably knows more than I do about this. So.
Yeah, that's a problem. Like, I'm as good as my last 10 tabs. And then, after that, like, it's back to square one. All right, let me try and because I feel like the link is broken, but let me see if I can find a working link real quick.
What was the name of the podcast again? What was the guy's name?
Richard Sarradet, Richard and then Sarradet. The link on Radio Misterioso isn't there anymore.
Yeah. Dave.
Oh, got it.
Got it? Yeah, man, if you send me the link, then I have a desktop with a voice meter. I can just pipe it right through.
All right, 1 second. Dude, I like this. There's like nobody in this space. Like, I fucking love it.
Yeah, and then I guess, we'll stop anytime that, like, I'll raise my hand if there's anything if there's a comment that I want to make, or not me, but yeah, just go on and raise your hand if like you want me to pause it, and then I'll pause it, anytime you want to make a comment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to use this excuse to get really high. So I'm not sure how many of those I'll have, but yeah, I sent the link.
I got it. I'm about to play it right now. And let's see how long it is. Hour and 55. Okay. Well, see how far we get.
In 2012. I was on Don Ecker's show the other night with my friend, Bill Moore and Richard Doty.
A little more about it, and perhaps you can, go through the chain of discovery of the identity of Falcon.
Okay.
It's interesting. I was just up on one of the forums, and one of the regular skeptics posted there. Did you see his post?
I didn't see it.
Yeah. I just have the school of thought that everything that happens is completely made up in Bill Moore's head.
Well, that's one extreme. It's
Yeah,
funny.
right.
That's the furthest extreme I've heard, that they just won't believe anything, because some of these people have no capacity for nuanced thought, I don't think. It's
Yeah,
either got to be true
or
or it's not true. That's it.
But that just surprised me that with corroborating stories and
Well, there isn't really. I mean, the only
pretty real.
Well, I was surprised the acceptance by a lot of people, because it's the only real word I have is Bill Moore's. And the fact that it, in light of everything else that happened, and as things were described to me by multiple people, not just Bill Moore and Richard Doty, that's what it was, that's what I found out, I think, is what was going on, which was a counterintelligence operation.
Yeah.
So this just continues that.
Well, Doty sure supported that concept.
What?
That it was a counter-intel operation.
Yeah. That's the other thing. It's that I think it works to some of these people's advantage when they find out that half the time or some of the time they can't be trusted, because people that want to trust them, and this happens over and over again, people that want to trust what these people have said will trust it without question if it matches up with their preconceptions. And if it doesn't, then they're, lying misinformation government people.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works, I don't think. You have to cross-check things and check open sources and check other sources and talk to people that you trust, maybe some people that you don't trust, and see if you can paint some kind of picture. That's
what intel gathering is.
Yeah, you have to paint some sort of a reasonably supported picture based on what you've found out, and then and more importantly, be able to adapt that if you hear an overwhelming amount of evidence to the contrary, or at least that will change it. And that most of the reactions I've seen, because the people that actually say something will have a strong opinion, I guess. But most of the reactions I've seen are either it's total BS or isn't this amazing, and we finally know. It's like, I didn't say that. I said that this is the best guess right now. I'd like to find confirming or contrary evidence from somebody that has more time, energy, and or more importantly, access and tickets than I do, or people that I know do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, the first one I saw was, and I can't remember who it was from, was like, oh, I get it now. What it was they were trying to confuse and cover up the UFO subject and discredit UFO researchers under the guise of a counterintelligence operation. That's what it is. Whoa! That's like way further than I'd take, I wouldn't take anything too far, but I should have realized that would be one of the reactions. And then, of course, the other one from the other end is it's all 100% total BS. Well, then it's very easy to dismiss everything and not have to worry about it, because you've just, by saying nobody can be trusted and there's nothing to it. Meaning everybody is lying 100% of the time. Ridiculous. Yeah,
oversimplified. That's no gray. No, not able to absorb contradictory evidence.
Yeah.
I accept it. It's very interesting. That Bill is, in this particular case, the source of that particular guesstimate of the identity. This guy, how do you pronounce his name again?
Rositzke.
Rositzke, yes, Rositzke. A spy master. So if it's phony, he made a very shrewd choice to make it all up.
Yeah.
But I guess if people are not inclined to believe anything, then they're not inclined to believe that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But the idea that Billy made up the whole thing, all this stuff is just made up by Bill. The MJ12 papers, the Benowitz case material is all made up by Bill. I think it's taking it too far.
Well, it's if you've talked to Bill, which I have many, many, many times, and then more importantly, talk to other people.
There are other people. Yeah, there is Jamie Shandera. There is,
I talked to Jamie, albeit not for the book, but quite a bit in the past before he kind of dropped off the radar. I talked to Tom, I think it was, Gary Massey, I believe, who was an old cattle mutilation researcher from way back, and his impressions of what was going on at the time. I talked to Krista Tilton, of all people, who was very nice. Mm-hmm. She wrote a book called The Benowitz Papers based on what she, thought when she interacted with Paul Benowitz. And
I want to come back to her and the timeline with that one. Go ahead.
Yeah. Gabe Valdez, of course, I talked with him. These are just some of the people. Leo Sprinkle. Tom Dooley from the NSA, Doty, of course, Jerry Miller, and Bill. And those are just a few of the people I've talked to.
Right.
Now, if you can talk to all those people and say it was 100% total BS, you just can't if you listen to them.
No.
Because there's a lot of internal consistencies in what they told me. And these people, some of them never met each other. Unless you posit some sort of thing where Bill, either everybody's in on it or Bill and Doty fooled everyone, which I seriously doubt. Mm-hmm. Just as an example, when Don said he thought it was wrong, they should be going in and, rearranging the furniture in Paul Benowitz's house, when he wasn't around. And, he said, I think that's terrible. And I said, well, that's only part of the story. I talked to Gabe Valdez, and I remember what he told me was that Paul knew that they were doing this. At first he was kind of freaked out. Then Doty or somebody or somehow he figured out it was the government doing it. And he said, well, I'm working with them, so I guess I got to expect they're going to keep an eye on me. That wasn't what made him crazy. What made him crazy was, one, himself, and two, possibly, and nobody ever refers to this was the fact that he said he was being injected with chemicals and being told to do things at night. And Bill, for one, said he saw these injection marks. Now, why would he tell me that?
Yeah, I mean, sure, you could, if you want to say he made it all up, I guess you're inclined to believe he made it all up, but I'm inclined to believe him. And I'm inclined to believe that that treatment of Benowitz took place because the after effects were so obvious.
Yeah.
And there are other people who saw him go through it.
Yeah. And there's another, it's another example of the all or nothing. It's horribly evil, total government people, screwing everybody, screwing up Paul Benowitz. And, well, that's only part of it. Yes, they basically stood out of his way and encouraged certain things when they thought it took him away from the base.
Well, that's when I want to get back to
They didn't say, we're going to drive him crazy.
His interest in the underground base build with the aliens.
Same results.
I mean, that he was well into this scenario before Bill Moore entered the picture.
Yeah, he was also
I think it was Krista Tilden wrote the book interviewing Myrna Hansen. Is that who it was?
Really? Is there an interview? Because I have that book.
Is that who? No, but isn't Myrna Hansen the abductee that?
Yeah, that's who started the whole thing. That's who Gabe Valdez heard about her. Gabe knew that Paul Benowitz was into the UFO thing, so steered her towards Benowitz. In fact, drove her from her home in Eagle's Nest, northeastern New Mexico, to Paul Benowitz's home. Before any of this happened, before the Air Force thing, before contacting anyone, that period was in the immediate time before that, well, probably a few months before, actually. That's another thing people don't realize is he's already involved in it, one, and two, well on the road to, being completely unbalanced at that point, according to Leo Sprinkle. If there's any UFO research that says Leo Sprinkle's a big fat liar, then there's something seriously wrong. Yeah, but I think that timeline is very important to point out, that how deeply he was into the whole, underground base and Dulce scenario. I was just saying, am I right that the woman it's all based on was given the name Myrna Hansen? I don't know if that's a real name. I don't know if it's her real name either. Writes her book on. Yeah, I think that is her real name. I believe Leo Sprinkle referred to her by that name when I talked to him, and I don't know if I ever asked if that was her real name or not. I heard that the last I heard she had moved to Northern California. So why does everyone move to Northern California and disappear? Anyway, she had moved to Northern California and just kind of dropped off the radar. I tried to find her, but I really couldn't for the book, and it just was not to be. I think she doesn't really want to be found. I wouldn't have either if I were her. What we're talking about here is this announcement about who the identity of the so-called Falcon was, who supposedly ran a counterintelligence operation in the 1980s. Greg, can I interrupt you for one moment? Yeah. I've got to answer a question from my wife. Okay. I'll keep yammering. Okay. In the 1980s, and was featured in a book I wrote called Project Beta. Also, what happened in the aftermath of that is I tried to guess who this intelligence operative's name was, based on clues given to me by Bill Moore. And eventually he told me that the guy's name was Harry Rositzke. I looked up some background on the man, did some research at the library, online, other open sources, just basically found out who he was, and that his profile would fit the picture of what Bill was trying to build up for him. And as Brian Parks, who is a researcher that used to work with Bill Moore, said, he's never really found any evidence that, it couldn't have been him, which doesn't really prove anything. What it proves is that, that either it was him or the story, somebody's made a great effort to keep the story fairly consistent. Uh-huh. So, like I said, I didn't make this announcement saying this is who he is and there's no question about it. I just said this is the best guess and maybe somebody else can find out more. And all I've seen so far is people saying crazy stuff. Anonymous from the, or whoever, or whatever group of people that is on the Serpo group came up, suddenly said, that was misinformation. The real Falcon was, Richard Helms, my old friend Richard Helms. Like, okay, you won't say who you are. Why did you hold this information up for so long? Why did you wait till somebody else said something? You know, and why did you wait about a week after it was announced before you said anything?
Yeah, anonymous.
Yeah, and why can't you reveal your name? And like,
so, who are you? If you know who a Falcon is, what are you? A Black Crow? No, that's somebody else. That's the Com-12 guy.
Yeah.
A Sparrowhawk? Or
Yeah. So I do not know. It's and then on top of that, they added whoever it was added a whole bunch of things about human interbreeding with the reptoids and quadroids.
Well, I've done that, but that was very late at night when I was young.
Yeah. But it's not I didn't think it was relevant to discussion. I don't know why, if that's some, what's the misinformation here? What I said or somebody talking about Richard Helms and reptoids and quadroids? I put that challenge to most people, that are listening. So a lot of, who knows if any of this stuff is true? I tend to think that Rositzke being a Falcon was more verifiable than reptoids and quadroids interbreeding with humans. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're having, as I described it many years ago, a conversation. This is all a conversation.
Yeah, which may never end.
Yeah.
And that's another thing a lot of people aren't happy with it. They don't like I brought this up before, but they don't like the, what's the word?
Irresolution.
Yeah, the excluded middle thing about it. Like, well, let's just leave it up in the air, maybe forever. And if everything, I think, unless you're standing there when something is going on, possibly, everything else is a theory.
Yeah.
And
it's a conversation.
What is this certainty fetish people have?
Well, that's the way information flows, and that's the nature of intel gathering. Intel gathering is trying to get information that's not readily available, trying to get information that correlates to add bits and pieces to other pieces of information, and from those little bits and pieces of information, try to connect the dots and make a guess of what it's saying.
Yeah.
If we had all the information, that wouldn't be intel.
Yeah.
Intel involves analysis and guesstimation.
Yeah. Based on the best evidence you can gather.
And you revise it with more evidence.
Yeah. So I wanted people to revise the Falcon Rositzke idea with more evidence from somewhere, even if they have to do it, completely by themselves, or back channeling it, or maybe not even, and not even bothering me about it. I almost don't care. Maybe I should care that I've seen something else on lists where it said Grant Cameron revealed who the name was. Like, well, not really, but I guess he announced it on his site. And they said, I trust Grant Cameron's research. It's like, well, Grant Cameron didn't do the research for that. However, what he did do was research practically everything else. And the fact that he doesn't automatically disagree with that, although I don't agree with Grant on some things, I'm no expert. The fact that he doesn't get all bent out of shape that it could possibly be Rositzke is telling to me, and it makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
Because he's, before I did the talk, I had sort of a running dialogue going with him, because he seemed to be the only person that even really cared. And he's been bothering me about it for years. So I said, Grant, I'm going to do this. And, and I asked him for some advice, and he answered a few questions of mine. And he brought out stuff that either I didn't know or I'd forgotten long ago. Grant Cameron knows more about UFOs and the government than and has forgotten more than most people know. And he hasn't forgotten very much at all. So I do have to say that he was really helpful and really nice to me. And, he knows that I don't agree with him on everything, but that doesn't bother him. And I think that's good. And it's also pretty rare, actually.
Yeah, it is pretty rare, I must say, but good.
Yeah. So what did you think of that, the announcement? I know you're kind of predisposed to agree with me.
Well, yeah, within the scenario, as I've seen it unfold, I will say this, my first reaction, when you described his background was, well, yeah, it sure fits the bill, and then of course the next chain of thought that came was the architecture and the arc of the operation, how long and how well planned and how devious it was,
Yeah.
Which is what I think I wonder how that evolved in itself. It always seems like we're talking about groups that are kind of, off the books, running this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
But with the cooperation of entities like the Air Force or the regular CIA.
Assets.
Huh?
These people, I think that they deal with a lot of people and sources that are assets that aren't on the payroll.
Yeah, it's like Redfern's book on the Collins Elite. These are all these UFO focused groups that described or uncovered or related by these people. Whether you're talking about the Aviary or the working group or the Collins Elite, they're all kind of off the book, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that the Aviary was, as far as I know, a bunch of people that were various degrees of insider and various degrees of intelligence connections or employment.
I think
trying to find out what the UFO thing was.
A bunch of people meeting in a room like in the X-Files to discuss, where to go from here. I don't think it was ever something like that where they met in a room and discussed things.
It was just a bunch of people that thought they could get the answer about UFOs because of their connections. And I don't think really a lot of them really got those answers. That's another thing people forget about Bill, why he quit. He's just said, I went all this time and I found nothing that I could prove. It was very interesting and fun. Yeah. I met a lot of people and had some adventures, but I didn't really find out anything that, he found out a little, but nothing to confirm the government knows a lot more about the UFO subject than, well, you know what? He contributed to the interest and part of the myth and maybe even some of the facts that, yes, the U.S. government, among others, is interested in the UFO subject, has been interested for a long time, and has some records pertaining to that. Past that, he doesn't know. I don't think anybody does. I mean, unless you've got a belief system where you think, everything's been answered and the government just knows, which a lot of people hold that opinion. And then, of course, there's Grant's idea that and he brought that out in the interview, and I titled the interview that. It's called "Disclosure Has Already Happened."
Yeah.
How much more proof do you need that there's an interest there and that there's,
Well, and I've made the observation myself that, when people say, well, I'll believe it when somebody, soldier number one talks, and I go, well, according to soldier number one, he did talk, and this is what he said, and soldier number four, and there have been many quote-unquote leaks, whether they're trustworthy, whether they're planted disinformation. That's another issue. But a lot of people who are a lot of information has come out that claim to be UFO connected over a long span of time and through various sources. I mean, the whole crash saucer mythologies that Len Stringfield, took testimony from people on, but all kind of off the books, off the record, and could easily be seen as part of an elaborate piece of theater as well, I guess. So,
yeah,
you're right. There is no way of knowing just how broad and far the cover stories have been established for whatever it is they're doing for its many uses.
Yeah,
and while in the meantime they may be nearly as ignorant as the average person on what's going on. I don't think they're that ignorant. I think they know, they follow the track, they're there, they see him, they don't, but, I don't know how much more than that.
Yeah, I think some people know, we've discussed this quite a bit over the years, but some people know a lot, but they don't know everything. What's important is some people know a lot about the government's history with the subject and how they've reacted to it, not necessarily what it is. And I think what a lot of disclosure people are hoping is it's going to be exactly what they want, and they're not, and what they expect, and not what actually would ever be announced. If it doesn't come out in exactly the way that they want to hear it, then it's disinformation and lies. Which is, I don't think I'm characterizing some disclosure people. I didn't say all, but some disclosure people like that. But
well, there's the old saying, when faced with the truth or the myth, people always go with the myth.
Well, they go with what And, I'm guilty of this too. I try not to, but they go with what their predisposition is going to be.
Well, yeah, I guess that's how we interpret anything that we don't know for sure.
Yeah, at least initially they go with that. Mm-hmm. If they really are curious and really want to learn, then, like we said before, they let new information edit or revise what their current thinking is.
Yeah, because, it ends up looking more like a collage than a, linear story. A lot of overlapping things that have no putting together except as a collage.
Yeah. I did not write out a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about, Richard, because I know that when we talk, we just get going, and that's fine. Maybe some people don't know, even though you've been on the show a couple times before, how we met and what happened to us in subsequent years and who we met and how our opinions my opinions on this have been shaped very heavily by the things you've shown me and people you've introduced me to and things that we've talked about over the last, 15 years or more?
Good God, yes. From I'd say from 93.
Yeah.
God, that's a long time, Greg.
Yeah. Did you call me first? I can't remember. Did you get my number from Vicky?
I did.
No, you got it from, I think, Peter Stencil.
Right. I tracked down Peter Stencil. I forget how, but, after reading the zine, after reading the Student Middle, I thought, I'd like to get to know these guys.
And
I called him and said, I'd like to talk.
Yeah, I think he realized that you'd probably be more interested in talking to me, or I don't know what happened, but yeah, we met, I guess, through Peter. But then around 5 or 6, that's when when Mike entered the picture.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when that happened.
Well, we have to look
at. It happened earlier,
Yeah, it was quite a while. I mean, you knew him first.
It happened. I think I met him in 92 or 93.
Oh.
That's when I was asked to cover that, yeah.
Oh, so that was about the same time we met.
Yeah.
No, maybe I knew him longer than I thought I did, unless you took a while to tell me about him, because then he started passing stuff to me that he wanted to put in the magazine.
I would say, if I were to guess, for maybe 6 months before I met you, 6 months to a year.
Okay. What the hell was he trying to do? I know some people have heard this story, but.
Well, I never have come to any more than estimations about what the hell he was trying to do. I think it's a complex picture, but basically he was spreading a tale representing the Navy's point of view on some of these matters concerning UFOs, and also to present other facts of broader nature about how the game works, and the broader implications into which the UFO and military-industrial complex and its interests collide. It had many fingers to it. His presentations when I was asked to cover it for UFO magazine, and this was happening in Santa Monica. Vicky called me and said, "I lived in Santa Monica at that time." So, "Do you want to run over there?" It's happening on 4th Street at the Women's Center. Steve Polidorus has been bugging us to cover it. This ComPro presentation. I said, "Sure, I'll go cover it." And that's how I met Mike Younger that night. I introduced myself as there from UFO magazine and asked if I could have a few minutes of time afterwards. We chatted, and from the very beginning, it had a lot of spy versus spy stuff. I was given a contact number and told how to use it and what to do when certain things happen on the phone line, which is basically waiting to the outgoing message that said, it's not taking any messages, and then to put in a phone number and hang up, and then I'll get a call back.
I didn't know about this.
Well, there you go. More stuff for the book. So that's how I started. I started with long phone calls and then meetings. And then Steve Polidorus. When I first saw Polidorus, Noah Harakawa, and Gary Schultz making these presentations, I was kind of like, eyes rolling, really, my eyes were rolling like, oh my God, all this super conspiracy stuff. And I didn't lose a lot of that. I mean, at the time, it was so thick and it was so conspiratorial. There was so much of that going on with the Bill Coopers and, Com 12 and the Aviary. I was just trying to go, well, this seems to be, some of this stuff seems to be coming from the government. And if this is the case, I'd like to see, what's behind it. Basically what Bill Moore kind of presented too, that you pull back the curtain a little bit, get close enough to where you can find out who's pushing this, who's behind this and what's it about. And, I don't think to this day we really know the whole story on the operation that is known as Com 12, but I think it was an off the books operation as well. To that extent, I think Younger was speaking the truth.
People might not know quite what's going on here. What this guy was somebody that presented himself to Richard and then later me as somebody working for naval intelligence and trying to get information. It's basically the same story of the Air Force or the Aviary trying to get information out of the government, thinking they could get it out through certain extra, certain non-traditional means. And Mike said he could do that.
If you point to what Younger was saying about the operation of the whole Bob Bazaar operation, when it came to their attention, quote unquote, they knew exactly what it wasn't, and it wasn't what it claimed to be at all, and they think it was an operation again to attract responses to the presentation and the location and see what sniffs around, and using that to track potential espionage talent, that might be trying to learn foreign governments. I think at that time, I think that really was the primary purpose of it.
Yeah, and the other thing was there might have been an inter-service thing because they knew that I had contact with Bill and that was an Air Force thing, and they could maybe drive a wedge in there or get whatever it was.
Yeah.
I don't know what I probably said a lot of stuff to Mike that I probably shouldn't have or didn't know I shouldn't have, but I'm sure what I heard from Bill and anyone else I was talking to at the time was quite controlled as well. Some people get angry about that. Why do you deal with?
All right, you want to take a break for a minute? Dude, according to Moore, J. Allen Hynek was involved in the Benowitz affair.
Yeah.
Did you know
he
that?
was the one that supposedly delivered the computer.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, it seems that, okay, so in that, what was the name of that TV show? It was like the one where they did the fake Holloman footage. The one that the Aviary
UFO Cover-Up Live.
There we go, yeah. And in that show, it was Condor and Falcon, right? Well, if Condor is Doty's co-author on the book that he wrote in the early 2000s, Day to Disclosure, something like that. If that's the case, then that means Doty's Falcon, right? Right? At least he was purporting himself to be Falcon.
Right, he was presenting himself to be as Falcon. Interestingly enough, too, I think Collins wrote that book without Doty's permission, and they got into a legal tiff over it, which is interesting. But you know who also thinks that or corroborates, and I don't know where he got it from, but the fact that Hynek was involved in the Benowitz affair, and it's one of the last things he did under contract, and he didn't even know what he was doing. He was just told to go drop this thing off, right? I don't think there's anything nefarious on his part. But Jacques Vallée.
Dude, it's like Jacques Vallée and Hal Puthoff are the two names that are just constantly coming up over and over again. Everywhere that I look, when I'm looking into the origin of modern ufology lore, it's always fucking Vallée and Puthoff.
And Kit Green too. Kit Green seems to be at the center of it as well. But it's like they were saying, in what Greg just said, these were people that they thought they could get the secrets, they could get the answers somehow, and so they kind of used any which way they could. There's that theory, right, that these people are behind a lot of the lore today. And Grant Cameron, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping from tangent to tangent, I'm a little stoned, but Grant Cameron has a quote somewhere where he's quoting Kit Green, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the gist of it is, it doesn't matter what gets out to the public, if it's fake or not. And he was using Serpo as an example, I believe, right? Like, it does not matter as long as it reinforces the core story.
Right. And according to legend, they wrote the core story in a Denny's at like 3 a.m. supposedly is when they came up with it. Jacques Vallée, Kate Green, Hal Puthoff, and some other people. I don't know. That's like the myth. That's the legend. I don't know if it's real, but
even if it's like a metaphor, I mean, like they combined like what they knew in their research at the time, and they came up with like, I guess like you said, the core story, like the things that are just that everyone can agree on are undeniably true, right? That there was a crash, there was a body recovered, and that there was an investigation. And there might be some more nuanced stuff to that, but like essentially that's it, right? Like that's the core story. No one knows any of the specifics beyond that.
yeah. All right. Am I cool to start playing again?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm cool if you play it all the way through, honestly. But if you want to,
Okay. Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, I'll stop at, okay, so I'll stop in like maybe around, I don't know, probably 45 minutes from now. So we'll listen to another 45 minutes and then, we'll take a break or we'll pause maybe.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, this is the type of shit I love, so whatever.
Yeah, dude, same here. Yeah.
People that are lying all the time. It's like, they're not lying all the time. That's the point.
No, they're not. It's a subtler game and more complex game than that.
And if you're interested in that game, I mean, above and beyond the UFO thing, I think Bill and other people like him and to a lesser extent, you and I were sort of involved in that game and enjoyed that for what it was, which was a very complicated game where you didn't know, talk about video games and role playing and all that. This was the real thing.
Yeah.
Or it sort of was. I mean, we were on the far, far end of it, but this is how things are run, behind everybody's back, and wars are started and probably more often prevented by all this junk going on in the background that nobody knows about. And a lot of people get angry about
the education we both got from our exposure to Younger and his point of view.
Yeah. And, the other part of his point of view, which sunk in with me, and also from Bill and Dodie and these people, is that, a lot of people get angry. It's like, why all the secrecy and why doesn't the public know? It's like, well, if that was the case, we wouldn't need to play these games. It's not, if everybody knows what's going on, then there's no, it's not in human nature to be completely open with anybody ever. At least in most people's nature, and especially when there's competing ideologies and ideas and everything. It just doesn't work that way. The fact of the matter is that, Ken's calling in. Oh. The fact of the matter is that, hi Ken, can you hear me?
Hey Greg.
Yeah, there he is. Just a sec. I can't remember where I was going with this. Oh, the fact that there is all this secrecy and some of it has to be maintained really bothers a lot of people, and I disagree with that. I think some of it should be maintained because just the way things are. The other things that are completely useless to have any secrecy on, it's just because people are so into the secrecy that, and it allows people with power to abuse it, and that's wrong. But wielded properly, I think that it's benefited people in ways that people don't know, and they never will.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, through my discussions with, people within that world and who have moved in that world and worked in that world militarily, I must say I've developed respect for the people way deep behind the scenes who have to balance all the interests, and, apply their take and their level of intel, which is, as deep as it gets almost, to make decisions on things, on life and death things, and on how to protect programs or how to uncover a spy. These people are extremely skilled and extremely bright. However, they may not look like it when you meet them and talk to them, because they're usually, not that evident.
Yeah, well, you don't, you think of it as people walking around with trench coats or sunglasses on or the whole bit. No, they're just, you would never notice these people and you would never notice unless you said the right things to them or they were told to talk to you. If you say the right things to them, all these little keys open little doors and they will open up a bit on things that make, because what you're doing is the currency there, and Richard and Mike and people taught me that, the currency is information. It's not money, it's not ego, none of that. The currency is what can you tell me that I don't know, and what can I tell you that you don't know, and if that information holds up, maybe we can do a little bit more business in the future.
Yeah, a lot has to do with spy versus spy technologies for the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
And the usefulness of the UFO as a screen for that.
Yeah, I mean, we get lost in this thing, either we get lost in the spy thing or the UFO thing, but they're, in the manner that we're talking about now, they're intimately connected. Ken's sitting here waiting for us, Ken Thomas. Let me plug him in here.
Oh, great.
And make sure he can hear us. Is it this one? Oh, there he is. Ken, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, all I hear is
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. What's so funny?
Okay, well, what you guys were just saying about secrecy and how it's kind of good sometimes that people use it to manipulate their way into power.
I didn't say it was
What?
good that they use it to manipulate their way into power. I said nothing of the kind. I said that
Did you guys do a review of Richard Helms' history?
No, please. Give us the encapsulated version, Ken. I'd appreciate it. I was very curious to remember what years he served as director.
Oh God, I can see that. That's easy enough to find on Wikipedia. But he was a director under Nixon.
Yeah,
and Nixon tried to get him to dissuade Ehrlichman, I think, from giving information out over something he called the Bay of Pigs, which is actually a reference to the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
And actually, what I was thinking, the analogy, the best analogy I can think of with Richard Helms being such an important player amongst in the intelligence world for so long, and then finally kind of degenerating into doing this silly UFO cover-up type radio show. The analogy to me was with Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay, who was also a Kennedy assassination figure, who actually watched the JFK autopsy. And, this was the guy who was responsible for the firebombing of Tokyo, was a very important player. He, too, at the end of his career, was shooting Trevor James Constable redesigned cloudbuster guns called Spiders. And so he, too, was kind of pushed into the UFO underground, just like Helms is, if all this was true.
I don't think Helms I don't think Helms was pushed into the UFO underground, and I don't think he really cared about it. I think it was a very, very, he might not even been aware of that part of it. I don't think. If he was, it was just kind of like one detail in a very large picture with him. That's what I think.
You're saying that he's a Falcon, right?
Huh? No, not Helms. No, that's what what quote unquote and the anonymous guy said on the Serpo board, that, it's not Harry Rositzke, it was this guy, it was Richard Helms. It's like, no,
okay. I haven't followed it this close. We had a little exchange and, didn't make that exactly clear. So you're identifying somebody other than Helms as. Yeah.
Well, who I identified Helms as was the guy that was taking information from Rositzke as the Falcon, on, Russian, operatives in this country, and also what was being pulled out of, agents in Russia, taking all that information off the books and passing it through back channels to the CIA in the 1980s.
Right, in Europe, this is early 80s, 1982.
Yeah, well, starting in probably 81, and probably even before, because I believe they contacted Bill Moore in 1981. And that
so Helms was out of the position there for how long at that point?
Well, he'd been out since 76, I think.
Yeah, so he'd been out of it for 6 years at that
He was
point.
called to testify at the 77 church hearings on CIA abuses that were triggered by the Frank Olson incident.
Right.
Remember, Ken?
Yeah. Of course Ken knows that
Okay,
one.
Okay, so then moved into the low-level intelligence gathering in the UFO community. But you're saying it's not that big.
No, that was a little tiny part of a very large operation, as far as I've been able to determine, and a few other people too. Is that this little part of all the stuff that UFO people are excited and upset about is a result of a very small part of a very large operation involving Russian counterintelligence, off the books operation run by Richard Helms and
well, I think the distinction might be here. The CIA director doesn't run the program. He has a deputy director assigned to run the program. That may be how Rositzke was functioning.
Well, he was
he authorized the program. He gets updates on it, but usually that's not going to be his main job, is running an operation.
Yeah, well, the guy Stansfield Turner was director of CIA up to 81, and then who was after that? Colby.
81. Was somebody up there? Stansfield, I think, before Colby.
Anyway, whoever came in
as president.
Yeah, whoever came in.
Page up right now.
Whoever came in 1981, I think
he served as an interim. I think he only served like 15 months or something. But I think that was back in the early 70s or something. When did Inman serve? Was that between? Might have been before Turner briefly.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, I think what people fail to realize is that this whole thing with Helms and Rositzke and a few other people, maybe some members of the quote-unquote Aviary, Bill Moore, Richard Doty, all of this was not an officially, on the books, records kept, anything like that, operation. It was a bunch of people who used to be in the intelligence community, quote-unquote retired, still doing their job, still valued by the people in the intelligence community for their expertise and willing to help out.
Well, that goes on every day. Yeah, absolutely. When people retire from that community and they have knowledge of operations and contacts that they had, something comes along that calls upon those skills of that history and their experience, and you bet the hell they contact you.
Yeah. What did you say, Ken? I don't know if you can hear when both of you are talking. I don't realize it. I don't know if you realize you can hear each other.
Was I talking over Ken? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just saying, I don't know if you can hear.
I'm making a minor point that once you join the agency, they kind of really expect you to be there for life.
Yeah.
Well, if you're good at it.
Nobody really believes, for instance, that George Bush, when he supposedly left the CIA, he never had a contact again.
No, if you have I think if you're useful and skilled, yeah, you never leave. If you basically not, if you just basically just a low level person or were never that great, I don't think they really care if you ever come back or they contact you. But if you're good at it, it's like anything else. I mean, the job I have now, I was contacted by somebody I've known for 20 years. This is just in video, but for 20 years. And he said, you know what you're doing. Do you want a job? And if I had sucked at it, he'd never called me.
Right.
So it's the same thing, I think, with spooks. I mean, if they're good at it and they know what they're doing and they have the need for the person, they'll call them up and say, do you want to do this? And I think most of the time that's their passion. They'll do it.
Well, some people say that might be what Corso did.
Yeah, possibly. What do you think, Ken?
I'm sorry, I missed that. It might be what?
Richard said, what we were just saying about people, being kind of called out of retirement to do a few more things. Richard made a really good point. Maybe that's what Phil Corso did. Oh,
yeah, that's an interesting point, yeah. It could be that all of these, Phil Corso included, that all of these UFO things that are connected, like Trevor James Constable being a Reichian cloudbuster guy, it could be that all of that stuff is designed to, that they don't really have a genuine interest, but it's all designed to keep people distracted from the main action of the agency and basically of the country. A little entertainment thing that they can control.
I don't know if it's a distraction more than it's a tool. If it's a useful tool, then they use the tool. There are many distractions, but I think if it is a distraction, it's an ancillary benefit.
Well, the UFO subculture attracts people that are interested in high-tech stuff and also kind of interested in spy activity. It's kind of always been that way. So you would expect.
Yeah.
you would expect that the
Oh yeah, well
CIA
that's why they were used.
or whatever, whatever you want to call the intelligence world, to have operatives, not only just, attending the conferences, but, probably doing things like creating. I mean, who was this latest guy who was talking about, Roswell?
Talking about what?
Oh, there was a recent announcement of some former intelligence person saying Roswell was 100% real and there were bodies and all that.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah, another CIA guy. I mean, how many CIA guys actually say this? I mean, so it says it so frequently, it's just, kind of interesting that it's not accepted as a fact.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny because as soon as the CIA guy says it was real and there were aliens and bodies there, all the great majority of UFO fans or whatever you want to call them say, oh my God, they're finally coming out with the truth. But if he'd said it had nothing to do with that, it was a secret operation and it was very important. Yeah, big cover up. Which one's the cover up? The one that you don't like is the cover up apparently. So who knows? I mean, I don't know.
This is I got this from Robbie Graham, the guy that does that website on movies.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see who this current figure is. Apparently he's on Coast to Coast. Charles Brandon.
Is that the name of the guy?
That's the name. I'm trying to figure out what his official position was at the CIA.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, I probably should have done all this homework before I called you up.
Yeah, well, he could have, He could have been a secretary somewhere and said this, and somebody would say, former CIA. Like, former CIA what? Head of intelligence, of Eastern Intelligence, or a floor washer. What does he claim to be? And besides, what difference would it make, actually? Because
the CIA's Historical Intelligence Collection, or the HIC, the HI.
So he was a historian for the CIA?
Apparently so. That's what he's claiming.
Okay, and he said he saw some sort of documentation.
Yeah, he had the rare opportunity to look inside a box labeled Roswell containing materials, papers, and other items, but stressed that he will not, under any imaginable set of circumstances, tell you what I say, what I saw in there specifically. Gotta forgive me, I'm losing eyesight here.
Unless you guess it.
What's that?
Unless you guess what it was. I'll tell you if you guess.
Then I'll say yay or nay.
Yeah.
Hot or cold.
Yeah. That's funny. I saw all this stuff that's definitely extraterrestrial, but I won't tell you what it was. Well, what else do we need to know? Has disclosure happened? I don't know. I think so. It might not be what you want to hear, but stuff has been disclosed.
Right. You don't want to expose the Slinky Corporation.
Yeah, this is really kind of interesting. This guy supposedly is connected to Victor Marchetti, too. He was a deputy CIA guy.
Yeah.
Deputy to Richard Helms.
Marchetti was.
Yes.
Yeah, people may not know, Victor Marchetti was kind of a whistleblower that left the CIA and wrote a bunch of books about the abuses the CIA was involved in, which the CIA and people in the CIA hated him for, and other people, civilians and journalists and all that, were very excited about this stuff. Now, who knows if all of that stuff was true? Very certainly some of it was. But it was also one person's opinion.
He made some claims about UFOs too, right?
Marchetti did? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What did he say?
Yeah. Well, let's see. According to Robbie Graham, fittingly, in 1979, Marchetti himself raised eyebrows with his own public statements on the UFO issue. In an article for Second Look magazine, Marchetti wrote, I do know that the CIA and the U.S. government have been concerned. Believe me, I can read. I'm just having problems with my eyesight. I've been concerned over the UFO phenomenon for many years, and that their attempts, both past and recent, to discount the significance of the phenomenon and to explain away that apparent lack of official interest is in it, have all the earmarks of a classic intelligence cover-up. So it sounds like he's just speculating, but he's basically saying that all this denial that there is a phenomenon out there is part of a cover-up.
Yeah, well, you can deny under an umbrella of all kinds of denial, and then underneath that, what is there? And you don't know. The reality of what's going on, the reality of what they know, the reality of what's been covered up, whether it's extraterrestrial or not. That it's a very large umbrella, and people hear that and they will immediately plug their predisposition into what that statement means.
It's hard to imagine that the intelligence world would not have infiltrated it and would not have tried to manipulate it, which you see,
yes,
a lot of times over time. And that's so this Helms business kind of fits perfectly into that.
Yeah. Richard, are you still there?
I sure am.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just go right ahead. This is great.
Yeah, Ken, I don't disagree with you at all.
On Robbie Graham's page here, the point is made that Marchetti was just expressing an opinion.
Yeah.
He wasn't, saying that he knew anything about it. He was saying that he felt, it was his opinion that he felt that there was some, CIA cover-up of the phenomenon. And not, that he had access to secret files that proved that or anything like that.
Well, I don't think that at this point, maybe in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, it made a difference as to what some people in power could say about the UFO subject, either publicly or through back channels to form people's opinion. I think at this point, most people that have grown up since then kind of take it for granted that there's extraterrestrials visiting us from other planets, or fairly convinced that that's the truth, and two, fairly convinced the government's covering it up. That's the working model now, where the working model used to be for most people.
To say, okay, the model may take some adjustments, but the fact that model now predominates and has a pretty high percentage of acceptance by the majority, says a lot. Now, they believe that there is something they think of as extraterrestrial, that it's something pretty not of us is out there, doing some shit. And the fact that they think the government knows a lot more than they're saying. Those two things go hand in hand. That's the juice of the X-Files and, everything else, right?
And how do people in power use that now? They can use that belief now instead of the belief that they're covering something, the belief that everything's fine and that wackos believe it. Now they use the belief that most people have, which is what we've just been talking about, to their advantage. And I don't know, how that manifests. You could make 100 guesses.
Well, it's like, the issue of, advanced UAVs, being, tested, and designed and tested a lot earlier, than people thought, and being utilized, and deployed. Again, if we didn't find out about the stealth fighter to the end of its useful life, the same thing may be true about UAV technology. And there are many different sizes and shapes UAVs can take.
Yeah.
And the application of, even the incursions on the nuclear weapons bases, and the beam cast down. I mean, a microwave beam. I mean, those things are achievable. I mean, we could make something like that. That would it would be stealthy and could shine a beam down, and
even in the 1970s.
Well, I can't rule it out, really.
I can't either, but I'm just saying hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically, I think maybe, yeah, in the 70s.
So it's the thing that fascinates me. One of the things
is a push. I agree with you. It is a push.
I know. The thing that fascinates me that comes to mind is the guy I had on who would not identify himself or who he had worked for or anything like that, but he was describing lighter-than-air vehicles that were both lighter than air and had vectored thrust in them. So they basically could do things that people thought UFOs did, which was zip through the air and then suddenly stop on a dime and just hover.
Yeah. Yeah, they have these, of course, with carbon fiber and Kevlar kind of materials, they can make these very hard shell shapes, which, of course, are much more aerodynamically efficient.
Yeah.
And make them really light, and there's a lot you can do with that. Combine it with turbine thrust and with the right shape, and It can be
and
very,
some of them they may be solid, so it's easier for them to move like that. Or, and so, and some of the movements seem like it'd be impossible for physical objects to do that. So, perhaps they're projections. People hear this and they think that we're saying UFOs are all created by the military. That is
not at all.
Not at all. It does not, it would not account for large amounts of the data.
If these craft do everything that they're described to be doing, then we probably would see them more in a military situation, right?
Well, who's to say they aren't used in a military situation? It's just we never hear about it because the people that are seeing them really can't believe their eyes, or they get freaked out by it, or whatever.
But we do hear about the most advanced craft that the military uses. That it shows up in the news all the time. In fact, the Iranians downed one of the pilotless tracking gliders, and they made a big deal about the fact that they were back engineering it.
Yeah.
You see that kind of thing all the time, but.
Well, that's the old, to me, that's the old argument, is that secret can't be kept. And, I think if the secret's important enough, it can be. And two, it's not really being kept that well, is it?
Well, that's the whole point. And the way what you do is you're surrounded with a bodyguard of lies, so that it's hard to tell which is the true story. That's what you do with leaked material, is that you just throw so many different versions of it that, it finally loses all potency. You don't know.
Right. That's what it seems to me to be the strategy. But if there is kind of a military intelligence infiltration of ufology, that seems to me to be what strategy they're using. And they would be using, they just inject all kinds of stories into the community and get all this discussion going, and then just point to the general population and say, see, these guys, they can't make up their own minds what they think they're seeing.
Well, I think the majority of UFO researchers are going to believe what they want.
Tracking how
so that's easy.
New memes spread, leaking a new version of something that happened about Roswell, and just seeing how it spreads.
Who's interested in what information, and if you spit something else out along those lines, where it will travel.
Actually, there's an intelligence term for that. That's called the barium meal.
The what?
Because that's called a barium meal, where it's because when you take barium, it's like a radioactive substance.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you have to, right, and then you track it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's I use that in Project Beta. I wish I'd known that term. And my idea was you throw dye, a colored dye down a drain, and then you look and see where the 400 drains comes out, which one it comes out later. And then you can kind of track, where that went, because you know where that drain went and what places it passed through. Or it comes out 5 of them or whatever,
Right.
And then you can start tracing back, and then all you have to do is put markers on different things that people are interested in, and see, it's you're doing, what's his name, Wisner's Mighty Wurlitzer again, where, the CIA at the time, he said, had control of the media to the point where they could change anybody's opinion about anything through their media outlets.
Yeah.
Right.
What's funny is in the way I found Rositzke's name before I even told it to Bill was with that name-based search they used to have online. It's namebase.org. And you could plug various spies' names into there through open sources. This thing had been put together through open sources. And what they did was they found a way to group people's names by how much interaction they had with each other based on open source information. And I plugged in, Richard Helms and Cord Meyer and various people like that who used to be in the OSS and later were in the CIA. And Rositzke's name came up. And then when I put Huh?
You plugged Cord Meyer in there?
Yeah. That was one of the guesses I had as to who,
does Cord Meyer have a UFO connection?
No, but this is when I was trying to guess who the name was. And Bill said he used to be in the OSS. He was in the CIA, and he was an expert in Russian stuff, which I could have guessed from, all the stories about, Falcon anyway. But what was interesting is when I did plug, Rositzke's name was one of the names that was in that cloud of names that came up on namebase.org's proximity search. And so then when I plugged Rositzke's name in, when it was confirmed by Bill, I put his name in the center, and one of the names that was right near him was Frank Wisner. And this, like I said, based on open source, like novels, not novels, but, exposés people had written, people's, even Rositzke's actually, memoirs, things like that. All published material on these people and how they interacted with each other.
Was Barry Hennessy in that mix?
No, he wasn't, because he wasn't at the time. He still isn't considered, I don't think he's written anything. I don't think he's, referenced really in anybody's history, anything like that. And Hennessy was never in the CIA as far as I know. He was Air Force Office of Special Projects in the early 80s in the Pentagon. He was another person that people had guessed was Falcon, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
I just plugged into namebase.org. Oh, no, it's a .com. All right.
There's a namebase. There's a namebase.org, and it has the search of people's names as referenced in open source books and magazine articles. If you plug in somebody's name, it just tells you everywhere they've ever been mentioned according to their records.
Wow.
But the cool thing that they used to have was this proximity search where you plug in names and it would just show you this huge chart of
that's really cool.
30 or 40 or 50 or 60 names and how connected they were to each other. And, they had lines connecting them showing if it was a strong connection or a weak one. And, and they'd have people's names near each other that were more in contact with each other. It was a fascinating thing, and it was a really good source of information. And that's what I used when I went to Bill and I started throwing names at him. And he finally got tired of it and said, it's this guy. And I said, well, Jesus, he's on this thing here. He goes, well, you hadn't said the guy's name yet, but apparently you had it.
Okay. I just plugged my name into it. I show up like 5 times in Namebase. How do you cross-reference?
I don't think it does that anymore.
Man, that was too good. I guess they took that away from us.
Yeah, proximity search. They may be still there. I don't know, but it was a namebase.org proximity search. Luckily at the time I printed out what I saw on my screen, and I still had those copies, so I scanned them and used them in a talk. I'm going to write up something about this sometime in the next week or 2 or 3 and put those images in there to show people what I did. And it's nothing magical. It's just that, I got 2 or 3 pieces of information that helped me do that. And I probably would have found the name out eventually. But what it was, I think Bill just got tired of me coming up to him saying, is it this guy? Is it this guy? Is it this guy? For like 10 months. And then we'd sometimes discuss why that person was a good guess or not, and, how they were related to the operation, if they were. And very few of them were. In fact, almost none of them except for Helms as a name that came up. And then, Rositzke's name only came up because he'd been mentioned in open sources, and he'd written, I think, at least 2 books on intelligence. One's called the CIA Secret Operations, and the other one was called the KGB, the Secret Eyes of Russia, or something like that.
As far as material related to the UFO subject, that's probably a very singular set of files. There's probably a lot more the CIA would be afraid of having uncovered, networks and things like that, than some of this UFO information.
Yeah, I don't think that most people in the government and these intelligence organizations even care about the UFO thing. And the ones that do band together in these informal groups and try and find out what they can.
As far as the DOD side of it, one can only guess. I'm sure they have, protocols because it's there.
They're like 2 or 3 levels above you and I, where they know some people and some things, and they're trying to use that to find out what they can about the UFO subject and how much the government knows about it. And I venture to say they haven't found out much more than we have.
Yeah.
That yes, there are UFOs. Yes, we don't know what they are. Yes, they are somebody else's technology. And no, we don't know what they are or what to do about it.
And now you got to be able to figure out if you're looking at a UAV or not, too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Some people got upset, have been upset over the years about, why you even care about all this government stuff, and how can we, why is this even valuable? I think it's valuable because if some of these same kind of stories are thrown at people again, such as I think, to my mind, on the Serpo website, all these red flags go up. Why are these people discussing this thing? Why such outlandish ideas? Why is the person anonymous? Why are they saying such, why are they pushing certain buttons? It's not, this guy's obviously trying to mess with us. It's, here's somebody from the government paying attention to us. So whatever he says must be true. Like, I don't know how that follows. But the point of all this, all of our discussion here is to try and find out what the false leads are and be able to inform ourselves when these false leads poke up their heads again in the future.
Well, that and I think getting our minds around the whole meme that we have grown up watched being created. Those in the UFO field, from the misdirection of the Blue Book operation to certain things we've done about what Heineken has told us about the Air Force, hiding the good cases, to the that really, when you look at the development of disinformation regarding it and how taking the UFO myth and using it to hide early on, planes flying out of Area 51 and being mistaken for a UFO because who else could fly that high or whatever.
Yeah.
That's sure that all that's understandable. And anytime you can hide your technology under a mustache, like, oh, it's a UFO, one hand washes the other in a sense, because we get stuck with, what are we looking at? Is it military or is it not,
Yeah.
And, it's a natural, camouflage that, of course, any military would use.
Yeah.
Technology is being seen as tested, But, I am of the opinion that we did progress a lot deeper into developing field propulsions at an earlier stage. I think it really began to show usefulness in the late 50s, in my opinion, that we could be responsible for so many of these sightings. But as far as whose craft or where they're operated out of and how that's done, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Notice that Richard says many and not all, because there's no way.
No, many, not all.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
Yeah. I mean, there are effects on witnesses. There are.
Absolutely. I'm not ever saying all,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, we may be seeing a lot of things that for all intents and purposes look extraterrestrial. Like black triangle.
Or at least extra human, something like that.
Yeah,
you know what came up, Richard, as you were saying that a little bit earlier, is that what you were saying about the manipulating people's opinions and using their predisposition. I was thinking the entire UFO community, at least the ones that are interested in the government thing and maybe aren't, they've all had a Benowitz pulled on them for like 50 years.
Yeah. Exactly.
And they've gone nuts in a certain way, just like poor Paul Benowitz did.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
It's a microcosm, that case I think is kind of a microcosm of a lot of the things that have gone on in the, disclosure of government.
If you're operating the Hall of Mirrors, you know which one turns and lets you out and which one doesn't.
Yeah. Ken, are you still there? Ken, did you get cut off?
Ken? Well, we must have lost Ken. You want to call him back, or is he calling you?
I don't know. Did he get pissed and hang up?
Oh, I don't think so. We just probably lost him.
Ken, can you hear me? Ken? Ken, can you hear me? Apparently he's picked up the phone. Something happened to Ken!
What are the mute buttons on?
Ken! Ken, are you there?
Went to get a cup of coffee or something.
Hey, Ken, are you there? Are you okay? Somebody rifling through your papers right now?
Anyway, let's see if he comes back.
All right.
Yeah, I was wondering if the Benowitz case, like, Nori Hayakawa is deep into the whole Dulce case, right?
Yeah.
To this day. And he's still convinced there is a base there. I don't think he necessarily believes it involves aliens, but I believe there's a base there. And he believes it's connected with the Archuleta Mountain and Archuleta Mesa to this day,
Yeah.
So Benowitz, what I'm saying is Benowitz wasn't the only one talking about Dulce or it was just the nature of the disinformation and the fact that you pointed out in your book that at the time it was used to take the eyes away from Kirtland and Sandia.
Yeah.
Then you look at the busting out the Bob Lazar story, which of course drew a whole lot of attention to Area 51. Was that part of a plan? And if they want us looking there, or was that an accident or what? Was that somebody's unauthorized, a la Doty going over the top operation?
Yeah.
didn't know it would go that far.
Yeah, what's interesting that Don brought up, I thought, was, did you ever think there was a connection between what was going on with, I got my battery low on my recorder here, so let me stop that.
All right.
Just a second, let me get my other batteries.
All right. Well, let's see, maybe we can do an ad for one of your sponsors. Home Depot or...
No, Home Depot isn't a sponsor.
No,
it's
Pepsi?
AFOSI is a sponsor.
Budweiser?
No. Ken, can you hear us at all? Ken, hello. Says call started. Apparently he's still hooked up, I think, but I don't know. Maybe he isn't. Let's continue here. What I thought was interesting that Don brought up was, did anybody realize that right after Bill Moore, or actually right before Bill Moore made his speech in Vegas, the Area 51 rumors started up? And I said, I don't think there's any connection. And then I thought about it for a while. It's like, that in the timeline, that makes sense. And two, I brought up the fact that Bill had been given that map sometime in the mid 80s,
right,
showing basically Area 51.
And S4 and saucer.
Yeah, there was the little line showing the runway, where the runway was, which everybody later knew from satellite pictures and all that, where the runway was. It also said that, I think the length of it was actually written on there in red felt tip. And then there was another like dotted line that said S4 area, and another dotted line drawn around this area, like to the northwest of the runway, maybe 10 or 15 miles away. I can't tell the scale, but it said Saucer Mesa.
Well, yeah, I'm familiar with that location, or, the references to it.
Yeah. And this was before the Las Vegas thing. It was before UFO Cover Up Live. So yeah, I mean, Don and you now have made totally legitimate points. I mean, is this part of something that was continuing and on a larger scale kind of benefiting the rest of the UFO community by drawing their attention over to what became known as Area 51?
Well, now suppose there had been the recognition by elements of the foreign government, and we'd intercepted the information to know that they were onto it, about us testing a very advanced, saucer-shaped craft out there, and had been for a while, or whatever. And that, we found that they were, hanging out and getting information, whatever, much more than we wanted out there. And you wanted to try to deal with that issue, right, as you can continue to develop the technology, let's say. So, rather than deny the existence of the craft itself, because this is, again, wrapping agendas and agendas, why not create an elaborate story about element 115 and 3 gravity generators as the source of power, and get everybody in other countries looking at that as the... I'm holding on a second here.
Oh, sorry, Richard.
Go ahead, that's right.
I've got Ken here on the line.
Good.
Say that again, Ken.
You there, Ken?
I went up on Natives.org and plugged in Helms' thing, found my name in there on its page.
6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, Richard says 6 degrees of separation.
Let me see if I go to my phone, see if I can I got.
Ken, you're cutting in and out because you mentioned Richard Helms.
It's wavering.
Okay, I will try to call you back.
Sounds like he said, I'll try and call you back.
Yeah, it's clipping.
Ken, if you call my cell number, we can mic that cell. I think it might be easier.
All right, well, I'll wrap up what I was saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Saying, while waiting for that to happen.
This is what editing's for.
Yeah. As I was saying, regarding, in other words, another layer of possibility is that you want to misdirect, the people from the technology itself by creating a false story of the technology, and see where that false story goes. While at the same time you are indeed testing some pretty sophisticated UAVs or something, out there that you're trying to
listen.
So
that's Ken.
The extension of this disinformation and the gray alien scenario into the Bob Lazar scenario the inclusion in both the Aquarius briefing document and in Lazar claiming the documents Lazar claims to have been shown and read included the religious issue and the eschatological issues of the origins of mankind.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very, like, why would they create all this eschatology?
Yeah.
And put it in there. It wasn't necessary. But it may have its own justification that we're not aware of.
Yeah, I mean, it may hook in with the Collins elite people. I have, in some of my talks, I don't think I put it in the book. Well, maybe I did. But, letters that Benowitz got,
You're very far away.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was, what I've brought up in talks were these letters that Benowitz got from, there we go, from somebody. He said that, he got into the whole religious thing about aliens that put Jesus here and Muhammad and
Right.
Buddha. And I don't know why that had been brought into the conversation, just like you said. And then I guess it was pushed again during the Area 51 stuff.
Well, that's what I'm pointing out. And I think that's a real eyebrow raiser right there. Because as you deconstruct this material, more and more, something which we sniffed and talked about, you see much more about perception management and creating a new mythology. It's the mythology in this sense is kind of deflating to some pretty sacred religious ideologies.
Yeah.
Very deflating.
I think it was thrown in there just to get more controversy in there and more people arguing and more, noise.
Yeah, another whole group of people that get all wrapped up in it. A little layered. Yeah. More stuff in the stew stirring around.
Yeah. And there may be something to the fact that,
but those are pretty disturbing things to include,
Yeah.
They're disturbing, just like returning the cattle to the site where it was taken after it's been worked on or whatever, dropping it back down there. That's a whole nother disturbing level of the phenomena. They could just keep the cattle, and this element of it's very disturbing would not be there. It would just be missing cattle.
Yeah.
But the mystery and the bizarreness of it is another whole part of the agenda, which I find disturbing.
Yeah. I think there's maybe an element in there where things might have gotten slightly out of control and that various agendas were thrown in there that didn't need to be, and I don't know what the justification was. Maybe it was just to, make things so mucked up and so ridiculous that, that basically washed, whoever was doing it just said, okay, that's the end of it. I'm going to throw religion in there now and not worry about it anymore, because that'll just spin it off into complete wacko land instead of just, and I'm not saying religious people are wackos, but, very, very strongly held opinions that aren't based on anything except belief.
Yeah, so it feeds a certain part of the UFO phenomenon, the cultish aspects. And of course, that's always been a big part of the UFO field, is the believers and all the cults that grow up around them, whether it's the Disclosure Project kind of believer, or the Nation of Islam, for that matter. The UFO is very much part of their, what's his name's preaching.
Yeah.
What's it, Louis Farrakhan?
Who?
Farrakhan, the Nation of
Farrakhan,
Islam,
yes.
Louis Farrakhan.
Yes, he had in fact, the first I knew about this was that Jim Mosley showed me the cover of one of their, Nation of Islam's, newsletters, and the front of it had a huge UFO on it.
Yeah, so I think you can look at it as a UFO cult.
Yeah, in part, at least the way that Farrakhan was trying to present it at that time. Sometime
not Islam, but Nation of Islam.
Yeah, Nation of Islam, not the Islamic religion as a whole. So I don't know if he was trying to update it, or I think the story was he said he had some vision where he was taken on a starship, and they told him that the Nation of Islam was very important, and
the usual stuff.
The usual stuff.
Yeah.
So not only does the Lord smile upon them, it's also aliens. But yeah, I do not know the reason for throwing religion in there, and especially in introducing it. It was very late in the game too with Paul Benowitz.
Well, see, that intrigues me very much. As far as belief shaping or shifting society, or what
that noise is? That's Ken's through
whatever purpose that might serve. It's intentionally done for a purpose.
Yeah.
And of course, there was all those guys caught up in the CIA back in the 70s with the channeled material, through the Uri Geller and that whole end of the spectrum. They were really into this, channeling the nine.
Oh, really? There were government people that were into that?
You're right.
Yeah. That was Einhorn was all into that for a while too, or the people he was contacting.
And there was another group in Europe that was getting contacts of a similar nature from a group that called itself the Nine. Channeling, being channeled. And that was it was all connected with Egypt and with Mars and that whole scenario that Hoagland and those guys kind of followed the trail on,
Yeah.
But that started with the Nine.
I never really realized that, but you're right.
Quite interesting trail to follow.
Maybe you better background people a little bit on the nine thing.
Well, it's been so long since I read about it. I had to pull a couple of books off the shelf and refresh myself. So I really, I hesitate to kind of like try to launch into it because I think it'd be more confusing than enlightening. But basically it was material that was being channeled, and one of the channels for it, I think, may have been, who was Uri Geller's associate? Puharich.
Oh, Andrea Puharich, yeah.
Yeah.
Another forgotten and very important figure in the...
Well, I think he played prominently in the whole Nine scenario.
Yeah.
And there was, again, a group in the CIA who were quite enamored with the Nine.
Yes.
And, and a connection with Mars, and had some, beliefs about Mars and its connection to us.
Yes. This is starting to come back to me.
And the Egyptians.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of they thought they were starting some sort of new secret society with some sort of answer to the questions of the universe because the channeled information.
Of how far the DARPA and the CIA and elements in the military were going and exploring these different things, and how much they were vulnerable to be influenced by.
Yeah.
None of this surprises me, because when I came to LA and began my own investigation into psychic phenomena, a lot of the stuff was in full swing. I mean, I got involved with the Edgar Casey organization, and I remember that Russell Targ and who was the other guy from SRI came to visit our one of our meetings, monthly meetings. And what they were basically doing was screening talent, psychic talent, it looks to me like, now looking back, for, the program that they were doing.
Was the other one Hal Puthoff?
Pardon?
Was the other one Hal Puthoff?
Not Hal Puthoff, the other guy. I hate saying the other guy. I can't think of his name.
Who, the psychic? I can't remember his name
either.
Another
Stanford guy.
Okay, I can't think of anybody else right now.
Okay, it'll come to me if I don't reach for it.
Not the psychic guy from New York that taught the remote viewers.
Not Ingo.
Not Ingo Swan. Okay.
No. But it'll come to me if I let it go.
Okay.
Right, but anyway, that all that stuff was flying around really, really heavily. There's been people in Hollywood channeling different stuff, extraterrestrial stuff, and that's nothing new.
Why did they take it seriously?
The Unitarian Church.
Yeah. Richard, why do you think they took it that seriously?
Pardon?
Why do you think that these people took this channel material seriously?
Don't you find that fascinating? Just like the Collins elite.
Yeah.
You're talking about being predisposed to something or something. I don't know. Did psychedelics play into it?
No. Well,
is it just an example of some energy, some disincarnate intelligence fucking around?
Yeah.
I've seen that kind of stuff on Ouija boards,
Oh, yeah, but at a higher level than a Ouija board. But yeah, the same thing happens where they say that whatever it is, or maybe the person's subconscious or whatever, is sending people off on these wild goose chases.
Well, I mean, Indrid Cole and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was about to say something not profound, but just an insight as to why these people would be interested. Oh, I remember. Strangely enough, a quote from William Burroughs when he was talking. He had a story about people in the military being interested in psychic arts or phenomena or whatever, and he says one of the generals doesn't give a damn about superstition or anything like that. All they care about is results. And if they can get results out of something, or they think they're getting results out of it, no matter how wacky it is,
absolutely,
somebody may pursue that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
I think it's not like,
yeah.
We get the impression that this is something, new, this is not something new at all.
Yeah.
Using psychics with governments. Yeah. I mean, this is old as mankind himself.
Yeah.
The idea in a modern technological society would be using it I guess is what's the shocking thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, then people are shocked because Nancy Reagan used to consult an astrologer.
Well, yeah, that's one example.
I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's like, just because somebody is powerful, intelligent, scientific, whatever you want to call it, does not mean that they shut off what the mainstream tells them to shut off. In fact, it probably encourages them not to.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Henry Wallace both consulted Edgar Cayce.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
What did he tell them?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
But I am curious to do more investigating, and so now all the readings are available online if you join the Aviary. So I actually sprung for it, so I can do online research into the readings. I'm curious about that.
I think
I'm curious about it from this point of view. Right? Be frank with you, I didn't realize that how big and prominent Casey was at that time in the 20s and 30s. And he was consulted by many very big names on more than one occasion.
Yeah, and I think they kept it quite down low.
Right, and through the 30s and early 40s. I have read that some of it, but not all of it. And I want to do some more digging, which is why I joined, so I get complete access to the readings to see what he said, because there was that whole kind of Anglo-Saxonism of the time. This belief that the white man was destined to rule because of his superior organizational and technological abilities. Right, that was embraced by many in the late 1800s and 1900s.
Yes.
Just an unconscious assumption, of course, which justified the continuation of slavery to a large degree and manifest destiny and traveling missionaries.
And just plain old racism.
Because we went out to find more trade across the Pacific, we took the traveling missionaries, as the Spanish did when they went into South America.
Yeah.
But this belief in the superiority of white culture was very insidious and pretty complete and normal at the time among white culture. Woodrow Wilson, embraced the idea of eugenics and the superiority of the white man. Even though he believed that in social justice, he saw the white man as superior. It's a very prevailing mem.
Yes. Richard, when you mentioned this and brought it up a few minutes ago, I was thinking, and I was sort of edging towards saying this, that the fact that people in power and with scientific training and all the things people consider mainstream and what's the word? People that would not mess with this mumbo jumbo.
Right.
I think the fact that they are in that position and they do feel privileged and they do feel a part and away and superior to most of the population means that these rules don't apply to them.
Right.
And they are free to use the means that people in power have used for centuries, which is, psychic powers and astrology and all this. And they
absolutely.
And that's the, I don't think it's there's a disconnect anywhere. It's because they've insulated from everybody else and feel that they are a different, maybe even a different race than everybody else, and the rules don't apply to them. So,
and that comes with morality too.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely true. And that's the unspoken bond You know?
Once you get either born into or put yourself into or lifted into that station in life, unfortunately, you just, I think some people, like I said, they don't think like everybody else does. They think that's what that got them there in the first place, and doing it even less like everybody else will get them even further.
Yeah. Well, I just think that this element, I mean, including the
eschatological
elements in the documents and the stories is quite interesting. We also had the Jim Jones experience, which was also something the CIA was neck deep involved in.
Yeah, I'm sorry Ken's not with us
right
now.
He had a
lot to say about that.
And the idea of manipulating cults, creating cults, and the whole 77 church hearings on MK Ultra and Artichoke and those other programs.
Yeah.
Which we got the sanitized version of, really.
Yeah. Oh, a lot of that stuff was destroyed before the hearings.
Yeah. And while the programs were shut down, the successful promising elements of those programs, you can bet, went into private labs and for further.
Doesn't matter how crazy it sounds, as long as it shows some promise.
Well, see, there's no problem for the Air Force, the Navy, or the Marines after seeing a trial project like that, and this how it normally works. They go, hey, so yeah, you did that thing for CIA and remote viewing, yeah, and guys, all right. They shut it down, yeah, okay, well, okay. How about you form a little group and we'll pay you to do it for us? Yeah,
but we'll pay you to be, to work for, Environmental Consultants International or something like that.
You'll be in SIGINT or something.
Yeah, or something like that. Mm-hmm. But that'll be your,
You'll be a line item buried in some other.
Right. Even if it only works part of the time. That's what people said.
Yeah, like I said, they're results oriented,
Yeah.
They're like police departments.
Yeah, it does. We're not going
to. They do it because, well, shit, man. And then people didn't go to Casey because they had the answer to medical problems. They went when, well, that's it. There's no hope. Well, you hear this guy gets pretty good results. Let's write him a letter, And they'd write him a letter, and he'd go into a trance, and they could be in Chicago, and he'd describe their bodies and what was going on. And
yeah. I think that's the idea with the remote viewing and some of those other things, is that it worked seemingly often enough that it was a viable tool. Now, people, a fundamentally skeptical person would say, well, there was, you could just not do it on demand, so it was useless.
And it's not right every time, but, in case of someone in the 20th century whose records are quite there and available, Casey's results are, way beyond any coincidence or chance. I mean, he could sit there and, upstairs with a photography studio, laying on his back on a couch with his dad saying, take a look for this person and see how their body's doing. And you could describe somebody, in Chicago and then tell them, go see Dr. So-and-so on Green Street, and tell them to take an x-ray of your upper right rear molar and they'll find an abscess. If they remove that.
All right. I think, that interview is pretty much done, as far as what we're going to get out of it.
I love Greg Bishop, man. Damn, that was a good one.
Yeah, I wasn't really impressed with the other guy. What was his name again? Richard Saradet?
Oh,
I don't know.
Yeah, the one that sounds like Disclosure, Mike. Well, it sounds like. All right, so to your credit, Harry Rositzke being Falcon is kind of up in the air. It's not as concrete as I thought.
I mean, it's like, yeah. I don't know, man. I look at it like concrete that hasn't been allowed to set, and doesn't use enough like, cement, and it's kind of crumbling and, it's just kind of sitting there cracked and brittle and everything. That's how I look at the Harry Rositzke theory, but I would love to know what Mr. Thomas Whitmore thinks about it. That man, he's been doing this for 20 years, so I'm sure he has something exciting some, bits of information to tell us. But yeah, man, I think it was all Doty and Collins and
Well, they mentioned Helms, didn't they? So I'm not too familiar with Richard Helms, but that's a CIA guy. I think even in that conversation, they were alluding to the fact that the CIA was using AFOSI as a smokescreen.
maybe, yeah, maybe. I mean, that's very, very possible. And I think that was even like, was that not even a part of like Bob Lazar's story, right? Where he claimed that like there were some Russians that were trying to investigate Area 51 and that was like, he was kind of warned about it. Like, wasn't that part of his story? So if anything, it shows that, there were stories of, during that time period of like Russian intelligence trying to infiltrate, top secret projects here, like in the United States, right? I mean, at least that adds something to it.
Yeah, well,
Adds maybe a possibility.
through the UFO community, nonetheless, right? I think the UFO community was a big target of these Russian operatives because, again, it's so easy for people to misidentify something and be like, look, here's the aliens, here's the UFOs, please look at this. Meanwhile, the people at the base are like, can you fucking not look at this, please? So, I mean, pretty sure it's like an information goldmine for them. Thomas has got his hand up. What's up, Thomas?
Hi. Richard Doty insists that Falcon was Richard Helms of the CIA. And I know that Greg Bishop said that Bill Moore told him that Falcon was Harry Rositzke. But Harry Rositzke was with the CIA. He was a Soviet specialist and he ran agents against the Soviet Union. But every indication that I've seen is that the deception operation that was run against Benowitz and all that stuff going on at Kirtland was formulated by the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and then run through AFOSI on Kirtland. So, I think that Harry Rositzke may have both may have been going on because, I don't know how proficient Bill Moore was with Russian, but he was getting postcards from Russia and then he would call a number. And this is per Greg Bishop's book, Project Beta, that Moore would get, postcards from Russia and then he would call a certain number and read the content of the postcard. So there may have been, and then Richard Doty has also claimed that Bill Moore was involved in helping to bring a Russian scientist to the United States. And that's all I know. I don't know any more about that, but I think both could have been going on, that maybe one, Falcon was Richard Helms and then Bill Moore was working with Harry Rositzke as well.
So if the DIA...
Yeah, and I mean,
Sorry.
The thing to keep in mind too is that the age of Harry Rositzke, he would have been in his mid 70s to late 70s, right? During that time period when Falcon was active. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, the guy was writing a book too, like Harry Rositzke was going on tours with media. He had a book, I think a book that came out in 1984. I mean, the man was like a media personality. I think Harry Rositzke, it just seems so far-fetched that he would have been involved in this. It seems like I don't know.
I don't know why not. I don't know why not. I mean, but we really just know so very little about that. We just get little bitty breadcrumbs of information. And then I'm trying to put all of these dots together. But the best reason that I have to believe right now is that it originated in the Defense Intelligence Agency, and that maybe Bill Moore was working, another angle through Harry Rositzke, possibly.
Well, where would the CIA come get involved then if this was something launched by the DIA?
Well, it was some kind of a really pretty big deception operation being run in the 80s, and it's hard to tell. Like there are several possibilities. One possibility is that when Bill Moore and Charles Berlitz published the Roswell incident, that maybe they were getting too close to the truth. And so maybe, an an operation was being run to divert the UFO community's focus away from, to manipulate it. And then another possibility is, you had stealth aircraft and, stealth bomber and stealth fighter, and that even Star Wars was a deception, that to psych the Soviets out into thinking that we had things that would not allow them to ever succeed in a nuclear war. So, that's another possibility that this deception operation was run, for those purposes. And then another possibility is that they were trying to smoke out Soviet spies, Soviet agents, or people that were informed, that were providing information to the Soviets. So there could have been a lot going on, and there could have been several things going on in parallel.
Do you see any comparisons to, so this was happening, let's say 80s, 90s. Do you see any comparisons to ufology today?
Well, Richard Doty has said, and I agree that it's certainly reasonable, that UFO conventions are open. I mean, anyone can buy a ticket and attend a MUFON symposium, or, contact in the desert or whatever. So, people from AFOSI or wherever can go on a personal level, and as a courtesy, they can, they would inform their boss, that they're going. Or if they were there officially, in their job, they probably aren't supposed to interact with UFO people. They're just going there to observe, and get an idea of what's going on. But the situation now is so completely different with the internet and with social media. And, there was a lot of suspicion during the 2016 election that the Russians were manipulating or trying to manipulate American voters, in the election. And, that's documented in the investigation report. So, it would be very easy, I think much, much, much easier to manipulate things today, with social media. But I will say this: they don't need to do a psyop on the UFO community. The UFO people do a perfectly good job of psyching themselves out, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And one thing, just to add some context, back in the 80s, all right, there was a decree that was signed by Reagan in 1983. And basically what this decree did, it was, let's see, I've got it written down right here. It was, I can't find the decree number. It was Security Decision, or National Security Decision Directive 130, which basically expanded psychological operations powers to the military, where they could do psychological operations during peacetime. It had greatly expanded. So, you have to keep in mind that, that kind of expanded the powers of the military, the AFOSI, to operate, even in the United States during peacetime, and conduct the same type of psychological operations that they would during a time of war. And that's what this could have been involved with, that too. I think, this whole this whole disinformation campaign with Benowitz could have been, an extension of that.
Well, it could have been, and I think it could be, but it's important to remember that Paul Benowitz was a walk-in. He approached AFOSI. They didn't approach him. He approached them. And then they got involved with Paul Benowitz, and he was a walk-in. So he was living right next to Kirtland Air Force Base near the Monsanto Range. And I've been there. I've seen it exactly where he lived. and he was observing, things going on Kirtland Air Force Base. So there's a AFOSI has a reason to get involved with non-military citizens if there is a connection with the military. For example, if you're in the Air Force and I'm selling drugs to you, AFOSI could investigate me, okay, because I'm interacting with the Air Force there or with Air Force personnel. And so Paul Benowitz was interacting with activities going on in Kirtland Air Force Base. So they had a lawful reason to be concerned about his activities.
Do you know anything about the two senators that allegedly went out and did an in-person visit to Kirtland during the 80s in response to complaints filed by Paul Benowitz about his harassment from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and other parties that he wasn't able to identify at the time. But apparently two senators I read went out there and, at separate times, not together, and went out there to investigate a constituent, who was fairly well off, fairly well known, a businessman in the community. He, he had complained to them. And do you know if that's true that these two senators went out there at separate times, or if that's, just a story that kind of got made up over the years?
No, they did, because Paul Benowitz was writing letters to them and probably calling their offices. He was writing the President of the United States. He was writing everybody he could think of. And so Paul Benowitz believed that there were flying saucers, there were UFOs flying around on Kirtland Air Force Base. And, like I said, he had approached AFOSI, he had approached the Air Force, trying to warn them that, these UFOs were flying over Kirtland. And so he was writing letters to these senators. And so the senators, being good, good representatives of the people, went in to try to check it out and find out what was going on. And I'm not sure exactly what the AFOSI people told them, but they probably told them.
They told them there was no investigation going on at all. That's what they told these two senators.
Okay,
allegedly, that's the story.
That's fine. Or they might have told them a little bit more, but there's probably a lot they didn't tell them, because there was an investigation developing, around Paul Benowitz. But they either told them nothing, or they told them just enough to, so that they'd be satisfied and go on with their business. But yes, the senators did go in and try to get an explanation.
Isn't it interesting that even in podcasts from 10 years ago, like Putoff's name still comes up? I'm sure it goes back even further than that, but just seems to be at the center of a lot of this, him and Kit Green.
Well, the core aviary, as I see it, is Jacques Vallée, Kit Green, and Hal Putoff. All three of them go all the way back to the 70s, and they're still with us today. Now,
in that 70s, that was with the Stanford Research Institute. That was their origin.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes, because Putoff was with them, and Vallée, I don't know if he was actually working there or he was associated with it one way or another, because he was with he was in the computer field. And then Kit Green may have been connected to it somehow because of the remote viewing project that was going on there. But those three go all the way back to the 70s, and then I add Eric Davis to that later. Eric Davis came on the scene later.
I heard Eric Davis is no longer part of that circle, though. Something happened where he was supposed to come through with, he had some sort of top-level insiders that he kept kind of stringing along, but they didn't come through. And I don't know what the relationship with all of them has been after that.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know anything about that. But I'm sure that
Thomas.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The Wilson Davis issue probably didn't help. But that was the thing. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Wilson Davis document was never supposed to become public. It was totally a private thing. Eric Davis, he interviewed Admiral Wilson, and on the understanding that the information would never be made public. And Admiral Wilson told him in the interview that if it does become public, he'll disavow it, he'll deny it, which he's done. And Admiral Wilson couldn't have been happy at all when all of this came public. And I'm not saying that created a disruption between Eric Davis and the other guys, but it probably didn't help.
Screen, you got your hand up.
My bad, I'm multitasking. Meanface, what you just said about Eric Davis kind of stringing people along and not really coming through for them, that checked something in my mind. Do we know who Eric Weinstein was talking to and communication with, that pretty much he said that same thing? Did we ever get a confirmation on who that was? Could it possibly be him?
No, what are you referring to with Eric Weinstein?
So apparently him and Keating were like in communication with somebody that was like giving them information about all this kind of being true, and they were going to meet them and show them proof type of thing. And then that part never happened.
Proof of what?
Of the information that he was sharing with them.
I mean, that's a pretty common theme, though. Happened with the Holloman Air Force base landing, right? It just kind of happens throughout ufology where, like, this is kind of hung over people's heads, and it's like, okay, well, it's about to happen. We're about to get the goods, and then last second, it never does.
Yeah, no, for sure. But it's just the way that Weinstein's kind of like a big name, and he mentions Eric Davis a lot, right? But he never said who he was in communication with. That's why that kind of went off in my mind.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, so proof of the Eric Davis memo being true, is that what he was supposed to, or what he was alluding to?
I don't remember the information exactly. I'll have to go back and refresh my memory on it, but it was basically just like proof of UFOs or this tech kind of being real.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Thomas, how much of like modern ufology lore do you think is the direct result of disinformation from the 80s that was created out of that, Kirtland base, out of that Air Force office, that Doty worked out of, and also out of like just the general, Aviary, campaign, like time period that they operated in the 80s. And I guess they stopped really in the early 90s. Of course they stopped as far as Bill Moore is concerned. Like how much of that, do you think, and of course you got the Majestic 12 documents being factored in around that time. Like how much of modern ufology do you think is like directly attributed to that time period and is not genuine?
Yeah. The MJ12 documents that Bill Moore received have pretty much been shown, the Eisenhower briefing document, the Truman Forrestal memo, have pretty much been shown to not be authentic. And, as well as the so-called Carter briefing document has some problems, but it's a very interesting thing. It all depends on whether there was really a flying saucer recovered from Roswell in 1947. And that's another theory about the MJ12 documents, is that it's an attempt to introduce this into the public domain, that it really did happen, that they really did recover a saucer, flying saucer and occupants in 1947. So I think personally, feel like I have good reason to believe that it's very possible that the government did recover a UFO, or more than one. But what happened was during the 80s, Paul Benowitz and Greg Valdez was a senior, was a state state policeman, and he and Paul Benowitz were going up to the Dulce area, and they were concerned about cattle mutilations and UFOs and all of this. And Richard Doty claims that a special ops group from Colorado would go to Archuleta Mesa and do exercises there, do training exercises, and they had like spotlights, on top of the mesa to help the helicopters land and all that. But Paul Benowitz believed that, they started this meme that there was this underground base in Archuleta Mesa in the Dulce area. And Paul Benowitz was talking to a lot of people, and, John Lear and Bill Cooper, and rumor mongers were running around and spreading this around. So a lot of the underground base meme, originated in the 1980s. Now, another thing that really came around in the 90s, it may have been around before then, but I got real involved in the UFO field around 1990. But in the 90s, this whole business about Project Bluebeam was floating around. I mean, it was circulating in the UFO community. That was 30 years ago. People are still bringing that up today. Okay, so I don't really get too excited about that. That's one example, but there has been a trend over a long period of time since the 70s with the Emmenager episode where they were promised, footage of the Holloman landing. Then you had the Roswell incident book coming out. Then you had other investigators like Kevin Randall and Don Schmidt who investigated Roswell much more thoroughly. And then you have the MJ-12 documents, and they had UFO Cover-Up Live in 1988, which, really spread the idea that on Area 51 they have recovered UFOs, they have, an alien guest of the United States government, and all of that. And that's deeply embedded, I think it's deeply embedded in the UFO psychology of the UFO public still today. And there's a reason for those ideas being planted. It could be because they want us to start believing that, or it could be, for other reasons that we don't know of. But I do think that it's deeply embedded in our UFO psychology.
I absolutely agree. And as far as, I don't know, here's how deep it goes as far as I understand. So, all right, so you've got Doty and other people disinforming Paul Benowitz, all right? Paul Benowitz writes letters, becomes like pen pals with guess who? John Lear. John Lear goes on to tell a bunch of stories to Bob Lazar. A lot of Bob Lazar has a Dolce firefight type story that he tells about Area 51. That came from John Lear, who got it from Paul Benowitz, who got it from AFOSI. Bill Cooper got a bunch of stuff from John Lear. He was friends with John Lear. Bill Cooper, behold a pale horse, and a lot of Bill Cooper's books went on to inspire Chris Carter, who wrote the X-Files. And then you've got Phil Schneider, who got a bunch of stories from John Lear, who's allegedly got the Dulce base story from John Lear. So John Lear's at the nexus of, just as much as Doty is, as far as like being the focal point where a lot of things kind of branch off. And, yeah,
That's true.
It's just crazy to think that the X-Files was influenced by Doty.
Well, Doty, I think, was a consultant on one of the episodes, but no, you traced it very well. And John Lear was something of a nexus for a lot of these rumors. And John Lear came out with some of the goofiest conspiracy stuff I've ever heard. Like, he was claiming that millions of people live inside the sun, and just really crazy stuff. But that's all true. And, it's spread around, and it's still with us today.
Didn't the Dulce base stuff come from Werner Hansen?
Myrna Hansen told a story that she'd been abducted it was actually she believed it was she was in the area of Cimarron, New Mexico. And Cimarron, New Mexico is near where the Boy Scout ranch is. And that she was abducted and that she was taken to an underground base, when they were mutilating cattle and doing inhuman experiments and all this kind of thing. And I think that some of the rumor mongers that were spreading these rumors connected her belief that she had been taken to an underground base with Dulcie. They conflated that, or they connected the two. Now, Richard Doty claims that they, in interrogating and in regressing Myrna Hansen, that the underground facility that she described almost to a T to the Monsanto weapons storage area inside Monsanto mountains. Okay. So that's another wrinkle to that story.
Yeah, that's something Doty claims. I believe that. So, like, the underground, the abduction that like led her underground and in a supposed base, that happened, I think, on the second hypnotic regression by Leo Sprinkle. Because, like, as far as I understand, the first one wasn't as viscerally. It wasn't as visceral. I'll put it that. And then he comes back a month later, and to his surprise and shock, Benowitz seems to be completely off the deep end. Like, between that month, that first hypnotic regression, and the second one, something seems to have happened to both Myrna Hansen and Benowitz, because the abduction story became a lot more viscerally, more of a horror story, and they both were extremely paranoid. So I don't know. I just I'm trying to find out where exactly the Dulce stuff came from via the the people who were spreading rumors.
Well, Benowitz, and like I said, Benowitz and Gabe Valdez had gone out, to Dulce several times. And if Benowitz is talking to Myrna Hansen and getting her story, about going to an underground base, so maybe he put two and two together and decided that she had been taken to Dulce, and it convinced him that the Dulce base was real.
I don't know. Do you guys want to know something crazy that I just found in my notes? Do you guys know that Doty and John Lear were in Laos at the same time during the Vietnam War? Doty was stationed there as part of his job, and John Lear was flying for Air America. They were in Laos at the same base at the exact same time. I think the Dulce story may have been created there. I mean, I think they may have co-authored it, or they may have I don't know. They may have came up with the Dulce papers right there in Laos.
I'm not sure about that. I've got a basic timeline on Doty's military career, and I'm just not sure that he was at the same place that John Lear was.
Was there any connection made? Because Greg Valdez, he was into the cattle mutilation stuff, right? So
yeah,
didn't he find?
I'm sorry, not Greg. Gabe Valdez is the father, and Greg is the son. So I misspoke. It's Gabe Valdez.
So Gabe Valdez found a gas mask at one of these sites, did he not?
As the story goes, and they heard something sounded like a lawnmower motor kind of a thing, like you would hear on a ultralight aircraft or something. And Greg Bishop mentions in his book that a scientist from Sandia Labs ran an ultraviolet light over some cattle and found that they were lighting up, because they had been marked with something. So there were some strange goings on, and it's a mystery. I mean, I don't think we have any clear answer about what those cattle mutilations were really about.
Have you ever read Greg Valdez's book, Thomas?
Yes, I have.
What'd you think of it? Did you think it was
reliable?
You think that
there's an area near Dulce or near Archuleta Peak or Archuleta Mesa area, and there are some compartments on stilts. Have you read his book?
I have, yes.
Okay, if you go back and read his book, he's talking about these compartments on stilts that they're guard posts because it's a highly sensitive, classified area. Well, it's actually a ranch, and they're deer blinds. Okay, hunters go out, they sit up in this compartment, and the deer come by, or the elk or whatever comes by, and they shoot them. And that he lost a lot of credibility with me after I read that.
Okay, well, that was my source for his book. Like, I finally found my note where I put the source. That's where the source of that louse, co-location came from. So yeah, I guess maybe it is questionable.
One thing to add just on the cattle real quick is there was some sort of a drug chemical that Gabe Valdez, I think, had tested. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like something that could, cause the cattle to be paralyzed or, easily drop them down.
I have never come across that. I do remember what Thomas was talking about when they did find that they were coated with something that contained high levels of potassium and magnesium, was water soluble.
Yeah, that's right.
At night. But he did also, this is a pretty cool tidbit, the cattle were all from one breed and were all between 1 and 3 years old. So there was a profile, I guess, that, that they needed to be in order to be marked. And then the markings were just so that, like, if you shine a UV beam at night, you'd be able to spot them. It's pretty low tech if it's anything other than humans.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
That would have been in one of his verbal interviews with Gabe Valdez when he said that about that chemical, but I just don't remember what it was.
Do we know, sorry, Thomas, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay.
Do we know who was briefing Kit Green?
About what? I mean, Kit Green had a very long career in the CIA.
Well, he did. He said he was briefed on the, what was it, the alien autopsy or something to that effect. And that's why he said he believed the alien autopsy footage when it first came out. And then later surmised that, like, the people that briefed him were doing so intentionally to deceive him.
Yeah, I think that comes from the emails that were attached in that whole cluster, with the Admiral Wilson documents. And I came away with the impression that Green felt that he had been disinformed, but I think he's not. I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing him. I don't know the man. I'd like to, but that he either reversed what he originally said, or he came back and said that he felt like he'd been disinformed, or that's as much as I know. But I think Kit Green, it's also been said that, things were being left on his doorstep, like CD-ROMs and things like that. And, you get a little bit suspicious that maybe people are trying to push things on you that may not be true.
Yeah, I guess the Aviary must have been an open secret if that was happening. Interesting.
Isn't that how the MJ-12 documents were delivered? I can't remember, like somebody's doorstep, like Bill Moore or something.
The MJ-12 documents were on a roll of 35 millimeter film in a plastic canister inside 3 different envelopes that were dropped off. They were either mailed to Jamie Chandray, Bill Moore's partner, or they were dropped off on his front door. Then Jamie Chandray took it to Bill, and they developed the film, and the rest is history. It's interesting that on the Psalm 1-01 document, the Psalm 101 manual that Don Berliner received that document in the same exact way. It was mailed in a roll of 35 millimeter film to him from a pharmacy in I think in Wisconsin. Whereas on the MJ12 documents that Jamie Chandray received, it was postmarked Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Jamie Chandray, wasn't he also involved in UFO Cover-Up Live?
Yeah, he was on the program. And Bob Emenegger was on the program. And the gentleman from Norton Air Force Base, the audiovisual person, Paul Shartle, was on UFO Cover-Up Live. You should be able to watch UFO Cover-Up Live on YouTube. You can just pull it up on YouTube and watch it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely on YouTube. Everybody should go watch that because it's just as far as like a historical data point and the people that were involved, it's not your average documentary, I guess. It's one way to put it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's one of the most important UFO shows ever made. That's just my personal opinion. Whether everything is true or not, or whether some of it's true, none of it's true, it's a very important thing.
Why do you say that?
Well, because it influences public perception and thinking about the UFO problem.
Would you say that's the primary television show that came out that kind of spun everything up for that time period, like the full era 1980s?
Yeah, it summarized most of it. You know, that there's an MJ12 and there's this matrix of government agencies that run the UFO problem. And, you know, you have Area 51 and they have a guest, an alien that's a guest of the United States government, and the NSA is involved. And they had some other more conventional kind of UFO material in there. They have a Russian UFO person on the program. You know, that's another Russian connection, maybe. You know, maybe getting back to Harry Rositzke. And then you had Falcon and Condor, you know, in shadow talking. And Condor is known to was Robert Collins. Robert Collins just passed away like 2 months ago or a month ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I'm so glad you repeated that, because that reminded me of all those shows. I know I would have saw every one back then, but I just, don't remember. So that's a nice recounting there that brings back memories of all that. That was quite interesting. And your story about John Lear just pulling stuff out of his ass. I mean, wild hairs. I mean, I can remember a funny time when he was on Snorri on the radio, and he was interviewing him, and he just started talking about all this crazy stuff going on at the moon, with all these aliens and the hollow moon, or just, any kind of wild thing you could come up with. And they actually had to kind of calm him down and say, John, we got to go to commercial here, and maybe we can talk about something else or something like that, because they were like totally embarrassed that he would say this kind of just wackadoodle stuff. And then when they came back, he was off on another subject after the commercial break. So these people were into wild tales.
Yeah, I actually got to sit next to him and his daughter at a conference in Las Vegas. The conversation didn't last very long because I guess I didn't 100% believe what he was saying at the moment, and he kind of acted like he was mad, and that was pretty much the end of the conversation. So I didn't get very far with John Lear, and that's probably a good thing.
So that name that you just mentioned, Thomas, for Condor, was anybody ever able to debunk whether he was Condor Man from that Reddit post recently?
I'm not familiar with that post. Educate me.
Oh man, I'm trying to think back to it, but basically it was some dude that was like a HVAC technician or something that stumbled across like a project. I'll have to look it back up. But it made a big deal. It made its rounds probably like 6 months ago, maybe.
Okay. I'm not familiar with it. I constantly research and write, but I can't, read everything. There's so much out there.
Yeah, Tom
Yeah,
has
I
a
definitely feel that.
really good blog. Actually, like people should be checking out. I don't know if you post it in the pill, like we can probably post it to the nest. But everyone, it's like right up there with Kevin Randall's, I think.
Thank you. I'm working on writing a book, so that's why I'm not posting any new research papers. I post some commentaries lately, just observations about what's going on in the UFO field, and I give a weekly update on the reading and research that I'm doing. And I'm starting to write the first chapters in my book, which is going to be a history of the MJ-12 controversy and perspectives on the MJ-12 question.
Did you ever, by chance, run into George Wingfield at any of the meetings? You know who I'm talking about or not?
Oh yeah, I had dinner with George and we emailed, but he was going to tell me all about what I should know about MJ-12, which I already knew anyway. But yes, we're not like close friends or frequent correspondence, but yes, I've met him. I know I'm familiar with him.
Okay, so you met him in person too. So your impression of him is a pretty reasonably trustworthy person with him.
Seems pretty level-headed. He's a little bit on the skeptical side. I don't know a lot about his history, but I had heard that he had gotten involved in the crop circle controversy that was going on in Britain in the 90s and early 2000s, and that he got burned in that somehow. And I think he became much more skeptical after that.
Yeah, he's a real interesting person. So I know a bit about him.
Doty mentions this conference as a defense for when he was caught spreading the Serpo documents. He keeps mentioning this one conference. I believe he says it was Wendell Stevens who gave a presentation about how it couldn't have been him. Do you know which one he's talking about? Like what year or what the name was?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to do a lot more checking. I think it was the predecessor to Contact in the maybe it was the predecessor to Contact in the Desert, but I think it was in Laughlin. It was a UFO conference that was held in Laughlin, Nevada.
Yes, definitely the one.
And I didn't go to those because I was with MUFON and I attended the MUFON symposiums every year. And that was my one big UFO convention per year. But I'm pretty sure it was Laughlin, Nevada.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking for a video of that one if it's out anywhere, just because Doty does keep referencing it as part of his defense, and it would be interesting to see that presentation.
Yeah. And Serpo, it's a great story. Even Doty has said he wished he had come up with it. He thinks it's a great story. But when you get into the technicalities of internet addresses and all that, I mean, I'm not technically proficient enough to form a judgment about that. And I've got to do a lot more research and really dig into that much more deeply before I feel like I can write about it.
Have you seen or have you heard Stephen Broadbent's podcast? Well, it's not his podcast. He was a guest on someone, but he outlined that entire story arc, basically. But he was the one that did it, and he lays out technically why it would not be possible for the IPs on a header to be anybody else's but his. But I'll send that to you if you haven't, because it's worth checking out. It's one side of the story.
Yeah, I'd be glad to have it. I may already have it because, I store things, for future reference when I get to that topic, because there are really a lot of topics involved in the MJ-12 controversy. But do you, on the other hand, do you really think that Doty created that whole story. You know,
Absolutely not. And that's, for me, it's perplexing because that implies that like there was a team behind the entire operation, and he's supposedly retired at that time. Um, so I mean, I don't know what to think other than that he was part of something bigger than he was letting on, because in my eyes, in my opinion, he was definitely impersonating those. Was it Paul McGovern? There was like one or two more other personalities that he was impersonating, but those IP headers, they tell the story. And then when you look at Bill Ryan's emails, and they were emailing Carrie Cassidy, she tells a story of how Doty would be sending them via mail the actual documentation. So, I mean, it's just too many things for me personally line up, but I don't know what it means ultimately, because I agree with you. There's no way he could have done that on his own. The science was too high. The technicalities of it were pretty well done. It takes a lot more than one person to do that, in my opinion.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not diminishing his mental capacity to be creative, but it seems to me unlikely that he would have created that whole story by himself and then started, sending it out to everybody. That just doesn't seem likely to me. He may have acted as an intermediary, and he was covering for other people that he wanted to keep confidential. That's a possibility.
Yeah, he was trying to write some scripts for the X-Files and stuff. So I can't imagine that, he wouldn't be a creative writer thinking up ideas with other buddies that want to come up with this stuff. I mean, I would think he would even be doing something maybe to track the story somehow in the community and see how that goes around, just to kind of touch base with his old his old counterintelligence techniques or something.
Well, one interesting thing I've turned up, and it is open source. There was a guy that posted on Above Top Secret. He was supposedly from Britain, but he was claiming that the Serpo story was created by a lady in the CIA in the 1960s. And she was actually a science fiction writer, and I never can remember her name. It's Mary Alice Sheldon or something like that. And she was I don't know if she was a CIA employee or a contract employee, but that he claimed that this person that wrote this post on Above Top Secret, that she actually created the Serpo story as disinformation to send to the Soviets, to freak them out, to make them think something. And I thought that was really interesting.
So I put that Condor Man post in the nest for everybody. But yeah, the part that interests me about Serpo is the technology, right? I'm like a nuts and bolts guy, and it would make sense that there would be some disinfo in it. Like Boyd Bushman there's a good video of him talking about this technology with the crystal that powered things, and it's just things that we're kind of now getting to mainstream today that would have been like at the forefront of technology theoretical stuff back then. But it's like he in the video he holds up a picture of an alien which turned out to be a doll, right? And so like maybe that's why they were putting the disinfo around it, because the tech was so advanced at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe the place and time, is not correct. I've heard that, they didn't do the exchange at Holloman. They did it at Area 51, and so you get things all mixed up and people are thinking one thing and it was actually something else. If it's true, something like that. I want to give you an example of the word disinformation is being widely misused today. Anything somebody doesn't like, they call it disinformation. But disinformation comes from the Russian word disinformatia, because the Russians were expert at creating disinformation. And I want to give you an example. I read this article in the Wall Street Journal many, many, many years ago, and I wish I could retrieve it somehow. But it went like this. The Soviets planted a story in Middle Eastern newspapers and magazines. And the story goes like this. American astronaut goes to the moon And when he's on the moon, he hears the call of Allah. He has a religious experience. And when he gets back to Earth, he converts to Islam. And his career suffers for it. Okay. They planted a story like that in the Middle East. And when you think about it, that would infuriate the Muslims after reading that. And it was this kind of thing that the Soviets would do. And it's true. Astronauts went to the moon, and one or more astronauts probably had it was a life-changing experience. Okay. Maybe even a religious experience, but he didn't convert to, he didn't hear the call of Allah, and he didn't convert to Islam. So that's an example of disinformation.
Isn't it interesting that people have those experiences, like astronauts when they go to space and stuff, and essentially they're like in a sensory deprivation tank, but like on max, you know?
Well, the first astronaut that viewed the Earth from space, he said the view is tremendous. And we're kind of used to it now, because we see it on TV and all this, but to actually be, on the moon and looking at the Earth, that I would think that could very easily become a life-changing experience.
Yeah, that would be dope to see in person. I'm sure pictures don't do it justice. My name orbited Earth when I was in 3rd grade. That's about the closest I got.
Well, you always have a remote viewing screen. Anyway, I have to start shutting this down. I have work tomorrow, but I definitely enjoyed the conversation today.
Just a real quick question before you go. Do you know any researcher or anybody that specializes in Robert Bigelow? Because that would sure be somebody we all ought to learn a whole lot more about, because I think he's behind a whole lot of things besides just Jacques Vallée or Hal Puthoff. He always seems to, stay out of the limelight, but he's like, to me, the big power player, either a queen or a king, in the chessboard, and he's got the money and funds all that. Anyway, anybody you can recommend, like you got the all the info on Bigelow, or as much as that can be gotten?
Well, he had Bigelow when he had NIDS. Most of the Aviary was working for Bigelow, or they were on his committee, his advisory committee, or, and all that. So the people that know the most about Bigelow are, the John Alexanders and the Jacques Vallées, and Eric Davis was involved, Kit Green was involved, and all these people. And they may or may not tell you much about it, because Bigelow is, he's very big on non-transparency. Okay. He's sitting on a tremendous amount of information that we never get to see. And he spent millions and millions and millions of dollars. In the 90s and early 2000s and on, there were 3 big donors that I know of. One was the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein. Now how much money he put into it, I don't know. But he was a contributor. And then Lawrence Rockefeller was a contributor, and then Robert Bigelow. And now Robert Bigelow is a private company. Okay. It's not a public company. So it's not like TTSA, or, you can go in and look at their financials and all that. It doesn't work that way with Bigelow and all. You have to play investigative reporter and try to develop sources and turn up whatever information you can. But I would start with people that have, that were involved with NIDS.
Yeah, and I appreciate the space, y'all. I love spaces like this. Thanks.
He's too smart. He's like, he's got them all under NDAA things, NDAs.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, Grider, we should do another one of these. I'll go through a list and see maybe if there's like a interesting.
Let's do the one of Art Bell, Greg Bishop, where they did like the same interview, Doty and Greg Bishop, like on Art Bell. That's what we should do tomorrow night or whenever.
Well, I got work all week, but like this week we'll schedule it. And Thomas, if you can come by for that too, that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, please send me a notice of when you're going to come on. Okay.
Roger.
I will. I absolutely will. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to just like post some more spaces that are just kind of, I don't know, more information dense. I think the space is missing it. So hopefully, like, we can change the course of the conversation a little bit. But yeah, I'll see you guys soon, man. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Later.
Okay.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Screen.
Okay. Thank
VC,
you.
you suck. I hate you. All right.